Will everyone identify themselves as present on the committee? Martha?
Present.
Carl? Carl here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Catherine?
Present.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Catherine?
Present. Can you hear me?
Tom?
Can you hear me? I'm here.
I can hear you, Catherine.
All this
Okay.
is when you're trying to fiddle with the controls.
I'm here too, Chris.
Face close to the
Okay. Yeah, I'm having a little trouble with this right now. Tom, are you here?
I am.
Can anybody hear me?
Chris, yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm here.
Yes, I can hear you.
So
Ms. Chair, if I could just
something
interrupt for
going
one
on
quick
with
second.
this, that it doesn't seem like the timing seems off. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say for everybody who's joining the meeting, if you could all mute your microphones once you are connected, and we will go over procedures for how you can address the board and or the meeting. We do have a chat function. So if you have a question, we ask that you would put your name into the chat function only, not your question, just your name. But in the meantime, if everyone could just stay muted, just so we don't hear the feedback in the chatter across the meeting. I think right now what we're seeing is with all the participants that are connecting, every time somebody joins, that's where we're kind of seeing that little step. So I think in the next, few minutes, I would hope and assume that we'll be able to have a normal meeting. So, Ms. Chair, if you want to proceed, thank you.
Chris, you're muted now.
Okay, Martha, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
All right, there seems to be a delay.
Yes,
Are you picking that up?
yes.
Okay, so everyone's present. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the school committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. Now, I have a question. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we are going to have a slightly different format tonight. We will have a call to order, which we have had. Then we will have public participation. And under public participation, if anyone has anything to address the committee about that is not related to the opening of school, at that time, put your name in the chat. Please don't use the chat for comments or for private conversations or for questions. Use it only to put your name in if you wish to be called on to speak. When we get to the next section, well, we'll get there when we get there. Okay, so first of all, is there anyone who wishes to speak under public participation?
Is the meeting called to order?
Yes, it is. The meeting's been called to order.
Thank you.
Diana?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to speak about the need to have an adequate fund. First of all, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I want to talk about the need to have adequate funding in order to address the challenges of teaching and learning during the pandemic. I heard that the town is looking to reduce the school budget, and yet every study about how to serve our students during the pandemic clearly states that we need more funding and not less. So I wanted to give you an example from my class. The 2019-2020 school year was the first year that Marshall Simons Middle School had a computer science program. And students in grade 6 learned to code, use computational thinking to design solutions to problems, work with physical computing. There was absolutely nothing like having a student who started the semester thinking that CS wasn't for her, beam with pride because she came up with a way to create art with programming or design a wearable piece of technology or figure out how to create an app to solve a real life problem. But most of our work involved pairs and group work, sharing microcontrollers and Chromebooks in addition to the usual classroom supplies. So with pair and group work, we needed fewer supplies because students could trade, share, pass off materials to the next class. This year, sharing is not an option, and there won't be a time to disinfect materials between groups of students who are being seen on the same day. Nothing is going to be the same this year, but students still deserve the chance to create in computer science. In order to do this, we need to buy not just more microcontrollers, but different ones that can be programmed with the students' iPads, because a lab set of Chromebooks won't be sanitary. It will also allow students to take them home for remote learning if they need to. So we need to have funding to make this happen. And this isn't just about computer science or just about Marshall Simons. There are hundreds of similar stories as teachers navigate how to teach when students can't pair up in person or share supplies. So educating our students this year is going to be a huge challenge as everyone adapts to less than ideal circumstances. I'm here today to ask that you please make sure that we have the funding we need to make it the best year that we can. We need all the funding we have. We need additional funding. We can't afford to cut the budget. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Diana. I neglected to say that the meeting number access code for tonight's meeting is 129-858-5616, and the meeting password is Monday. Okay, is there anyone else under public participation? All right. I'm getting a lot of a blank screen here. So Martha, can you hear me?
Yeah, it looks like Liz Tucci has her name down, if that's for public participation.
Okay, I
And
don't
also
see
Michelle
it.
Smith.
And then Michelle Smith. You are breaking up a bit, Christine. But
Yeah, sorry about that.
call on Liz DiTucci at this point, perhaps?
Okay, now, Liz, you're up, but only if this does not have to do with school reopening. That will be taken under the next agenda item.
Totally understood. Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, mine's really quick. I understand that maybe going forward, you as a school committee might meet in person. And so mine
Yes.
isn't COVID related, but my request is that we continue to have the WebEx available, even if it's by request only, should that someone want to participate and just timing and scheduling doesn't allow them to be there in person. So that was just the request I wanted to put forth.
Yeah, so when we go public, when we get together in one room, which we hope to do next week, we cannot have public in the room with us because the social distancing requirements can't be met. So the public will be on WebEx or Zoom or whatever the administration decides on.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. Michelle Smith?
I will wait for the school reopening section of the agenda.
Okay, thank you. So as we move on, again, like I said, we're going to do this a little bit differently this time. So Dr. Conti is going to present his school reopening plan. And then we're going to have a time block for input from the public. We hope to keep it to about 30 or 35 minutes. Each speaker will be allowed up to, but no more than 3 minutes. And at the end of that time, since this is a general business meeting, this is not actually a public hearing, although it sort of looks a little like one. The school committee will listen to the comments, and then after that time, the school committee will deliberate before voting. So this is a different order. Again, please use the chat only to put your name in if you wish to speak, and don't do it now. Wait until after Dr. Conti does his presentation. Okay, Eric, you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Go.
So thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to explain that the reason for the meeting tonight is a state deadline. I know Monday night is out of the traditional cycle for the school committee. We originally had an August 10th deadline by the state. So that's the reason for the meeting. We don't control all of the deadlines during this time of year. I just wanted to say the decision tonight is whether we continue to plan for an in-person option in the fall. That's it. We're not voting, asking the school committee to vote on schedules or a lot of the specific information that you'll be seeing tonight. We're presenting as many specifics as we can to help inform that decision. I would also encourage the school committee to watch the data and work closely with the Board of Health. We are probably about 4 weeks away from when school would open, and things are changing so rapidly that it may be a decision that you make tonight and that you want to revisit prior to the start of school. And again, so tonight is not an ending. Tonight is just really a choosing a direction and then really providing us where we want to focus moving forward. So we will have emails throughout the slideshow if people don't get a chance to ask a question, and we'll be writing down all the questions people ask, and we'll be getting you answers again as soon as possible. If you don't get a chance to ask your question, please email your question in. We're keeping track of all of the questions, and we'll be posting answers as soon as we can. In looking at all the questions that we've received to date, there are many overlapping questions, so we're trying to group them and get them out to the public. Madam Chair and the rest of the committee, this is not the first public showing of most of this information. It's been developed by teachers, special educators, nurses, and principal teams. It's been shown to parent groups through school councils. It's been shown on VCAT to the public. And it's also been shared with our district working groups for some feedback. So we've tried to compile all the information into one spot. I know tonight's presentation is going to be long. I will try to get through it as quickly as I can. But again, the vote tonight is just about the mode of instruction that the school committee is going to support into the fall. Again, the reason for the vote tonight is a state deadline because we have to submit our plans. Again, the deadline was originally the 10th today. The state did extend that deadline until Friday, the 14th, but we had already scheduled this meeting prior to that date being changed. So that's why we are here tonight. And again, and that's why the vote is taking place. We will have a remote option in the fall, no matter what we decide. So I'm looking at this as whether you want to have an in-person option to go with remote. We will need a remote option because the remote option is always available to parents if they choose. So again, the vote tonight is whether we want to have an in-person option to accompany a remote option. Voting for any sort of in-person option does not eliminate the remote option as a choice for parents. So with that, Bob, if you could put up the first screen, I'm going to try to move again as quickly as I can. So again, what you'll see throughout the slide is the 2020 school opening at bpsk12.org. That is the email address that you should send questions to. If you don't want to ask the question in public, or you're not called on, or we happen to run out of time this evening, and we will make sure we get you an answer. Next slide, Bob. So we started at the end of June, before the end of the year, to discuss guiding principles that are shaping our decision making. The guiding principles have been out and have been public for all throughout, from June all throughout into the summer, throughout the summer. Our principals have been using those guiding principles to create their planning, along with the state guidelines for safely opening schools. So again, I'm not going to read them to everyone. They've been out on the website. They've been very public, and they've been here. So Bob, next slide, please. Thank you. So we were tasked by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to conduct a feasibility study given the health guidelines that they had released. The feasibility study had different components, obviously centering around staff and student health and safety. We were looking for operations. We had to look at resources, instruction, obviously, and communications were main components that we had to focus on. We're going to try to organize our presentation tonight around each of these topic areas. The presentation will be available publicly, and it would just be a way to help organize information and for us to continue to add information. And again, we're trying to break out different pieces of this on BCAT, and we're having individual BCAT shows. Again, on operations, we'll have a instructional technology and remote learning presentation on BCAT this Thursday, and the following Thursday we will have health, safety, and protocol information presented to families as well. So again, we're going to be breaking down everything, but tonight's presentation, we're going to try to give some information that covers all of these options. Next slide, Bob. So we're going to look at feasibility. Again, please see the email 2020 school opening at bpsk12.org. Bob? Again, talk about principles because I like to think of them as guardrails, especially when we're talking about health and safety protocols. There's no single principle alone that mitigates all risk. We have to look at some of these things together. So it's not just about mask wearing, it's about mask wearing and social distancing and making sure that we are practicing good hygiene. And so it's everything together that lowers the risk. I do want to say that we can't reduce the risk of COVID transmission to zero, and some risk will remain even with maximum adherence, and especially if the community transmission increases. We've been working and will continue to work closely with the Board of Health as we move forward. I'll have more information about that as we move forward. Bob? I also want to say in all of this process, we're taking a balanced view of risk. That means we know there is risk to returning to school, to having students return to school. We're also saying there is risk to keeping students out of school. And that risk can be a loss of learning. We have some students who have food insecurity. We have parents who need support to work during the day. There is certainly an impact social and emotionally on kids not learning with their peers. Again, nationally, they've seen a increase in some child abuse or a reduction of detection of child abuse. And again, we have a lack of access to essential services for students who need those services based on some challenges that they may face. So again, we have a balanced view of risk in this process. We know there's some risk to returning that we're trying to mitigate using multiple measures, but we also know not returning to schools also poses a risk. Bob? So we've been working with the group Ariadne, and I will explain sort of who they are later on in the presentation. But the Ariadne group is a collaboration between the Harvard School of Public Health and Brigham and Williams Hospital. And They really keep us up to date on some of the reasons for the health principles. Again, no school administrator can claim to be an expert or an epidemiologist. I certainly cannot. So we're relying on these health experts to help guide some of the decisions that we're making. So again, I don't need to read all the bullets, but we know individuals can transmit the disease. Bob, if you could go back, please. I'm sorry. Children under 10 have milder cases. And again, we know that the research is changing all the time, and we need to be mindful of that. This is why my earlier comments with the school committees. Schools don't appear to be epicenters of COVID transmission, at least of late. Transmission seems to be related more to droplets than through surfaces. That's why we're asking everyone to wear masks all the time. Physical distance still is important, and public health practices, again, disinfecting, hand washing, immunizations are critical to reduce the spread. Bob, next slide, please. Masks, again, we are surpassing the state recommendation that only requires masks from grade 2 on. We're saying that we feel all students, pre-K and including pre-K, K and 1 students, need to wear masks. Masks, at least in talking to the scientists who I've had access to, they say masks are a key element in reducing the spread of the virus, and they recommend a higher standard than the state is asking us to have. They don't see face shields as a replacement for wearing masks. So we've had some parents ask, can my child wear a face shield instead of a mask? The answer to that is no. They're saying face shields need to be worn with masks. Again, distance, the state is saying anything over 3 feet is allowable. We are trying to maintain a minimum of 6 feet because that should be our goal. In cohort size, we're trying to keep all of our gatherings under 25 people, especially when indoors. And so we are looking to follow those guidelines in our planning for a return to school. Bob? Mask wearing, again, one of the reasons the doctors have stated to me why mask wearing is so important is they keep quoting this hairstylist study that they looked at. And they studied a bunch of clients from 2 hairstylists who were COVID positive, and everyone wore masks. And the hairstylists, who obviously were closer than 6 feet to their clients, they didn't spread the virus to any one of their clients. So again, they just keep going back to and reinforcing for me that mask wearing is, if we had to throw all the precautions out, they would say the one to maintain is mask wearing. Bob? Already mentioned face shields shouldn't replace masks, and 6 feet of physical distance should be a priority. And again, barriers may be used in combinations with masks, but they actually don't encourage any sort of those plexiglass barriers in classrooms. They feel it creates another surface to sanitize, and they feel that social distancing and mask wearing provide sort of a maximum level of safety, and there's not a great increase for the plexiglass shields that are sometimes seen in international schools or pictured on the news moving forward. Bob? Distancing, again, they just are being a little bit granular here in this slide with their recommendation. And there's not a great increase for the plexiglass shields that are sometimes seen in international schools or pictured on the news moving forward. Bob? I think someone's mic is on. Distance, and there's not a great increase for the plexiglass shields that are sometimes seen in international schools or pictured on the news moving forward. I think someone's mic is on. Distance, and there's not a great increase plexiglass shields that are sometimes seen in international schools or pictured on the news moving forward. I think someone's mic is on. Distance, and it's not great increase plexiglass shields that are sometimes seen in
Lisa Gogan, turn off your mic.
Thank you. Please leave your mics off. It's we'll pick up feedback from Facebook and other things. Bob, could you please put the slideshow back up? Could you go back one, please? Thank you. So while we're maintaining, we feel that 6 feet is best. The state is saying anything over 3 feet, especially at younger ages. There was only a 3% risk of transmission, but again, we are focusing on maintaining the 6 feet of space in terms of social distancing as a starting point. Bob, next, please. Since as part of the feasibility, we did a lot of classroom measurements. We looked at the furniture that we had, and we explored some differences along the 3 to 6 foot continuum, and we wanted just to show some examples. Bob, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. I can hear
Could
you.
you go back? Could you go back, please? Thank you. All right. One more slide forward, please. Or actually, back. Please go back one. I'm sorry. I think I lost the audio. All I wanted to say is we're focusing on 6 feet. The state is saying 3 feet, especially for younger students. There's about a 3%, they're saying at 6 feet, there's a less than 3% risk of transmission. At 3 feet, there's a 3% risk of transmission. What I'm saying is all risk doesn't sort of drop after lower than 6 feet, but we are trying to work towards maintaining the 6 feet as we go through. Next slide, Bob. So we've spent a lot of time measuring classroom spaces and looking at how many students that we can fit in. And we looked at different arrangements of classrooms based upon a 3 to 6 foot continuum. Again, the state is saying a minimum of 3. We are focusing on maintaining 6. Bob, next slide, please. So we looked at classrooms again with 6 foot examples, and it's just a matter of how many students we can fit in our class sizes. So for an average class size with us, it looks like we could fit in around 15 students at 6 feet, and we can maybe get potentially more depending on the size of the classroom. Bob, next slide, please. At 5 feet, we could get in 22 desks, again, relatively easily. There's obviously some combination of that. We feel like we could still potentially get 6 feet. These are just sample configurations to give the school committee some idea what the classrooms would look like. Bob, next slide, please. And these are, again, a 3 foot distant examples in terms of how many students that we can fit in. We are not recommending a 3 foot. I just wanted to show the difference between a 3 foot configuration, a 5 foot, and a 6 foot configuration, just because pictures might be easier than trying to explain what the differences are and what they look like. So again, we are aiming towards 6 feet, and we'll sort of explain how that looks like when we get into our individual school plans. Bob, next slide, please. All right, we have enough. This is our result of our space analysis as part of our feasibility study. We can exceed the 3 foot minimum physical distancing. We may not be able to return all students with 6 feet of physical distancing, even though we think we can get very close. And again, it depends on the percentage of students who return. And we had some grades where it was an immediate issue, and those were the 4th grades at Francis Wyman and Fox Hill. Parents in those grades know that that's a larger class. And so we've posted additional homerooms. So a 6th homeroom at Francis Wyman and a 5th at Fox Hill. We may not need those depending on how many parents choose to keep their students home. With those additional sections, we get much closer to having all kids at 6 feet of physical distancing across the elementary school, and we can maintain the 6 feet at the middle and high school because our recommendation is only to have half the students in the building on any day. Bob, next slide, please. Also under our staff and student health and safety, I just wanted to tell the committee the PPE status. We did not wait to order PPE, so we have the this PPE we are in possession of. Barbara Conley, our nurse leader, followed the state recommendations, and we have enough for the first 12 weeks of school, again, using the state guidelines. So just to give an example, we have 2 disposable masks per staff member per day. We have 1 disposable mask per student per day, even though parents are expected to provide masks. We have additional PPE for nurses, special education staff, including gowns and face shields. We have 550 smile masks. Those are masks where they have a clear panel so students can see a teacher's face and her smile. And so again, we have 12 weeks of PPE, and we are also in the process of identifying and equipping separate isolation spaces in every building. We are required to have a separate isolation space in addition to our nurse's office in every schools. Personal protective equipment. Someone corrected me. Thank you. Next slide, please. Wanted to go over our initial family surveys. The key word here is initial. We will be surveying families again after this evening, after the school committee vote, because we'll have more information. But we just wanted to look at an initial survey. Bob, could you just go to the next slide, please? And again, if we asked 100% in-person or hybrid, so if there were a way to have kids back in school, would you send your child to school? Again, initially, and this is now several weeks old, we understand things are changing, and we understand that we are going to survey both staff and parents again. We felt like there was a high majority, over 80% of parents wanted their kids to return to school in some capacity. Next slide, please. Alternating days or alternating weeks. Again, we had some initial feedback on that. Next slide, Bob. We're going to have some transportation conversations if the school committee is going to allow any sort of in-person return to the fall. Transportation is an area we still need to work out. Obviously, they are limiting the ridership on all of our buses, and so we're going to have to rethink transportation from the ground up. So that'll be something on the to-do list. If the school committee votes to go full remote, then obviously we'll have to make different decisions about transportation. Next slide, please. This is our initial staff survey. And again, understanding that there's more information now and understanding we have actually surveyed staff again, and we're getting information, more up-to-date information actually as we speak. It looked like there was about a 50-50 split between folks feeling ready to return but nervous and those who have some hesitation. Again, I think everyone's concern weren't about working with students. All teachers want to go back and working with students. I think the majority of hesitation and concern about the learning environments and everyone has safety concerns about returning to school, which are completely understandable. Next slide, please. Again, we will be sending out a new survey to parents this week, and we would like to get the information back by Friday, August 14th, if possible. Again, knowing what the school committee is going to allow, providing some information, some potential information on what the schedules could look like. We have to know the number of students who are returning and those remaining remote, because it's critical to our planning. And please understand, the state is saying we are responsible for taking attendance in either case. So we need to know where children are, if we are providing their education remotely or whether we're providing their education in person. So we're going to need more granular information from families. We just needed the school committee to vote prior to presenting those options to families. So please be expecting another survey from the district this week. Bob, next slide. Again, communication, we'll talk a little bit about the communication as part of our feasibility. Again, I'm also showing the email address for questions. Again, if you want to submit a question, we will make sure we get back and answer your questions. We'll take down any of the questions that are answered also to the school committee and get answers to you again at a later date. Bob, next slide, please. So the results of our feasibility study in terms of what's possible, we had to choose between a full return as defined by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Again, they define a full return as any return where you're not dividing the student body in half. So we believe we can return all elementary school students to school. We are recommending a shortened day, at least initially, but that's what we're calling a full return. We needed a hybrid return at the preschool to the middle school and high school levels to maintain social distancing, and we feel maximize to enact the safety recommendations that we're also being asked to follow. Remote learning changes are required at all levels, but we will be offering remote learning at all levels as well. And again, I just want to stress, and I'll stress several times through the presentation, the remote learning that we are proposing for the fall is not the same as the remote learning that everyone experienced in the spring. It's going to be significantly different. The state required us to submit all 3 plans, even though I'm telling you what is possible in terms of what our recommendations are. We could not do a full return at the preschool, middle, and high school levels and maintain social distancing just because of the space in the buildings and the number of students that we have in those buildings. Next slide, Bob. After school program, there's been lots of questions about the after school program. We actually had a meeting this afternoon that included Donna Sullivan, and we talked about the who has signed up and what we're going to try to do. We are exploring options. The after school program falls under a different state department, and they have slightly different guidelines. So Ms. Sullivan is putting a plan together. We will need that plan approved by the state agency. We also are going to ask the Board of Health and our nurse leader to look at that plan. We understand that many families and staff members are looking for after-school care. So we know it's very important. We believe, again, we are exploring initially the possibility of after-school programming from in kindergarten through grade 5. There was not enough demand at the middle school for us to explore that as an initial option. We're looking for the outdoor after-school program to take place outdoors as much as possible. Understand we have to plan for inclement weather. Students would be in the after-school program for lunch and activities. At the elementary level, there is a remote lesson that occurs after lunch. So the after-school program students through their remote learning lesson in the afternoon, and we would end the program at 4 o'clock, at least initially. So we were looking in that possibility. We would not transport students between schools as we typically have done last year. We would need to find space and have all the students remain at their home school. We're obviously trying to mix the kids as infrequently as possible. There's going to be some mixing that we can't avoid, but it doesn't make sense to, in the after-school program, bus students from one school into another school if we can avoid that. So when will we know about the before and after school program definitively? I'm hoping in the next couple weeks we can have an answer and a plan for people and have that plan approved by the state agency and the Board of Health, and so that we can move forward. Next slide, please. In terms of communication, upcoming staff and family sessions, we have staff trainings that are beginning August 10th. They started today. And then we'll have training that continues after August 24th when staff return to work in terms of what we're planning. And then we'll go over a opening calendar in a minute. Family technology sessions are going to begin August 20th. And the family sessions will focus on our foundational BPS technology, which again are listed below: Clever, Portal, Seesaw, Google Classroom, and Google Meet. And we're going to have pre-recorded videos that are posted anytime for viewing. So this will be both synchronous when they occur and asynchronous. So So again, it is the upcoming training we were asked to provide training for both families and staff, and we have that scheduled and planned in the coming weeks. Next slide, Bob. Communication protocols. There's been lots of feedback that all of our stakeholders need to be clear on what we can communicate and what we can't communicate. So I just wanted to say the Burlington Board of Health is our critical partner in all communication. Unlike during a regular school year when much of the communication comes through the school district, during COVID times, a lot of the communication regarding COVID and what is happening regarding COVID in the schools will come through the Board of Health. We have protocols drafted for testing, tracing, and school closure protocol. We have protocols drafted for our response to COVID scenarios in terms of what would happen when. We have a flow chart for testing, isolation, and tracing. Again, we have a draft protocol chart ready to go. And we have what we are hoping for are COVID metrics for school closure and reopening. Right now, the state, we would take that guidance from the Board of Health. We're hoping that the state provides some sort of metrics, either county by county or some state metrics, and many of the other New England states have done that already. So we sent all the drafts proposal to staff this morning. We'll be making these public this week. Obviously, all these protocols depend on our operation in the fall. If it is fully remote, then we won't have as much need for following the protocols for testing, tracing, and school closure. But again, unlike most typical years, the communication regarding COVID or COVID-related incidents in schools will largely be coordinated with the Board of Health and through the Board of Health. And they're a critical partner in all of our communication. And I can't thank them enough for all the work and support that they've provided us in the district. But we understand that many parents and actually our building administrators are waiting to see these protocols. And so after the school committee votes tonight, we have protocols that are ready to be shared. Bob, next. We have a district working group, again, also in place in regards to communication. If you are still interested in joining the district working group, again, the email again is 2020schoolopening@bpsk12.org. We are welcoming as many perspectives as possible. We are not limiting people. We are allowing everyone to join our group, and we are trying to provide some structure and getting feedback. I've met twice with the groups that I'm managing, and I think as has everyone else, and we're going to continue with those meetings even after the school committee votes tonight. We're going to continue to seek feedback and work through some of the details that are going to be needed before school opens. And just to state again, the district working groups are advisory to the school committee, and we're sharing the feedback from those groups with the school committee. Bob, next slide. Next slide, Bob. The Parabola Project. I think I've talked about this again. It's a collaboration between Ariadne Labs and the Learning Accelerator, and Ariadne Labs is a partnership between Brigham and Women's Hospital and the Harvard School of Public Health. Again, I'll restate, none of us are public health experts or epidemiologists. We get a tremendous amount of support from our local Board of Health, but Ariadne in particular has worked with other states and other countries in terms of school opening, and they provided, I think, a great framework and some guiding documents for us to use and to shape some of our planning. Next slide, Bob. So again, they've broken this up into principles. So I just wanted to inform the school committee that we've been meeting and breaking down a lot of our questions, frequently asked questions from parents, and we've been having conversations with our district working committee in these principal areas. So leadership and culture, risk stratification and prevention, testing and tracing. Bob, next slide, please. screening and triage, space layout and air quality, cohorting and scheduling. Next slide, Bob. Masks and PPE, hygiene, and that's personal and space. Principle 9, density and distance. And we've added a 10th for remote learning. So Bob, if you could just do the next slide, please. So I just wanted to give an example of what those principles look like. So if you look at principle 5, again, from the parabola process, again, which is coming out of the Ariadne Labs, and the learning accelerator is principle 5 would be space layout and air quality. They have it broken down into ventilation, filtration, HVAC system performance. I know that was a concern of many teachers and parents. Identifying and vetting additional space is something that we needed to look at, and looking at de-densifying hallways and bathrooms. And again, that might be more of a school-to-school conversation, but we're trying to provide have common conversations across all schools so that we can make sure that we're all addressing the details that need to be addressed with an in-person return. Next slide, Bob. So again, what the Parabola group has done is taken, I've taken one of those, which is 5.3, which is de-densifying hallways and bathrooms. They have key recommendations for consideration, which is great. They have examples that other states have done. They have sample school layout plans and signage. So what the group has done is provided a centralized location for a lot of great information and the research behind those decisions. So again, we're not doing this blindly. We are partnering with the Ariadne and the Learning Accelerator under their Parabola project to provide some guidance. Bob, next slide, please. And again, this is, I believe, developing a clear and aligned message about masks. Again, this is just another sample for the school committee about the guidance that we're getting and why we're making the recommendations we're making about masks. Is we're getting that guidance again from the Harvard School of Public Health through the Ariadne group, and we're following their direction and process. Bob, next slide. So we've had 5 groups based on the readiness principles, and we've had 60 plus participants, again, representing parents, teachers, staff, and the community over the 2 meetings, and we're going to continue to have that. We are sharing the feedback with the committee, and we're going to continue to meet weekly to discuss principles and to continue to move forward. This is not meant to be something that stops even when the school year starts. I think we're going to continue to get feedback because this is going to be a dynamic situation in terms of whether we need to make any contractions in our plans or whether we can expand our plans if we start successfully. Next slide, Bob. So just to give the school committee some information on the groups, again, I'm looking at working with the leadership and culture and risk stratification and prevention. Our nurse leader and special ed director are working in testing and tracing, screening and triage, mass PPE. Bob, our director of operations, is looking at space layout and air quality, hygiene and density and distance. We have a group of principals working on cohorting and scheduling. And then Patrick and Dennis Villano are working with the remote learning group because, again, we need to have a robust remote learning option no matter what the school committee decides. Next slide, Bob. So operations, I just want to touch on some operations. I'm not going to get into a huge amount of depth. We did do an hour on BCAT, focusing on operations last Thursday. And I know that that show is available either online or I'm sure it's continuing to rebroadcast. So again, the email address if you've missed it for asking questions. Next slide, please. Again, we are looking at all different types of options in terms of transportation, pickup and drop off protocols, which all need to be rethought, how we move around schools in terms of hallways. So the operational parts, there's very operational pieces that the principals are going to be working with, but the district is trying to provide support for that in terms of outdoor areas, in terms of signage, arrows, and then exit protocols, and then transportation is something we really need to spend more time with. Next slide, Bob. So this is, again, an example of the parabola process in terms of identifying and vetting additional space. We've had to create isolation spaces in every school, again, in addition to our nurses' offices. The isolation spaces are where students who are presenting symptoms, as well as staff who are presenting symptoms, are taken to keep them isolated from the rest of the school. So we've identified all those isolation spaces in every school, and those spaces have been approved by the Board of Health and our nurse leader, and those spaces are requiring some specialized equipment and some specialized PPE. Our gymnasiums, because we're not going to be having gym physical education in a traditional sense, we are looking at storage areas because we're moving a lot of furniture out of our classrooms. Cafeterias, again, we're not going to have large gatherings of students, but we're still going to need to prepare lunch for our food insecure students. And we may be able to use the seating with students spread out for a flexible learning space if we're needed. Again, music auditorium and art rooms. That instruction is going to be taking place differently. And as we discussed, we may need an additional fourth grade classroom at both Fox Hill and Francis Wyman. It may be without a classroom that we move those classes temporarily, those homerooms, into a music or an art room. And again, we're looking at our library as a possible flexible learning space where we can provide social distancing for students. So we're going over every single space that we have in our schools to look at the possibility for providing a learning space that we can provide distancing in. Bob? Again, I'm well out of my area of expertise, but I will say we are looking at our ventilation systems and our HVAC systems, and we're looking at possibilities of upgrading our air filters. We are contracted with a third-party engineering firm to evaluate all of our HVAC systems in schools. That work is ongoing, and we're also working with some industrial hygienist, someone in town, to help us make sure our schools are the safest they can possibly be. We can't replace our HVAC systems in the amount of time we have before school starts, but we want to make sure that they are functioning and how they should be functioning. And again, we'll have a third-party engineering firm doing that evaluation, and we'll be sharing those results publicly. Why don't we have that work done ahead of this vote? Is our timelines have been so condensed, and again, we didn't create the August 10th deadline. So we're doing a lot of things concurrently. So I understand that criticism, but we will have that information completed before the start of school. Next slide, Bob. Again, Bob Cuna presented this information on his BCAT survey in terms of the difference between a univent and a roof unit. Again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but most of our schools, middle school, Francis Wyman, Pine Glen, and Fox Hill, have univents. And again, they do draw air in from the outside. They have independent functions, largely used for heating. But it is possible to have them draw in air from the outside, which is sort of the question that people are asking. Next slide, Bob. And two of our schools, the high school and Memorial, have rooftop units, and again, typically capable of heat or AC. And I'm just reading the slide myself, and but they do bring fresh air into the classrooms via ductwork. And again, all of these systems are going to be evaluated, and we're going to try to maximize the fresh air that are in classrooms in terms of how they are utilized. And we'll be sharing those evaluations from the engineering firm with with families and with staff. We'll make it public. Bob, next slide, please. Can you just go back one, because I know we're doing air quality testing as well, and I didn't include that, but we are having a firm come in and do some air quality testing. There was some comments made because in order to get a baseline, they're going to come out and sample a bunch of classrooms in a school. I think the percentage they gave us is about 30% of the space. They're going to test to get a baseline. One of the comments was, why don't they do 100% versus 30? We're relying on the professionals to tell us what it is they need to establish a baseline. We'll be doing some other air quality testing. I don't know enough about it to say testing 100% of the spaces is any better than testing 30%, but we will ask that question and we will post it. We're just asking them to get a baseline in terms of air quality. And I am asking the Ariadne group from Harvard Pilgrim Health to give me some guidance on any sort of air quality measures and whether that is even correlated to any spread or anything that anyone has experienced with the virus in other schools or other countries with their opening. But we will be doing air quality testing in the coming weeks as well to get a baseline. We're obviously going to have to redo it if we have students back in the buildings, because having the buildings full of people is going to impact the air quality. But having a baseline measure is an important place to start. Next slide, Bob. We've purchased a bunch of outdoor tents, and those are distributed to the school. And we're just trying to think ahead to provide mask break areas for both staff and students. We'd like the mask breaks to take place outside as much as possible. In fact, we'd like as much of the learning to take place outside as much as possible. So we're honestly just seeing how they work. We're going to be setting them up. We're going to be trialing them. These aren't a magic solution by any means, but I'm just trying to say we're trying to get as creative as possible to explore as many options to provide some safe outdoor learning spaces. Next slide, please. Instruction. I think this is what people are mostly waiting for. So Bob, if you could again, next slide. So I wanted to talk about the opening for the opening calendar for staff. The commissioner, since this information was first presented, has shortened the school year from 180 to 170 days. The state is requiring that those 10 days be used at the start of school for training for staff. We asked if we could break it up. We asked if we could use it at different times in the year. We asked if we could use fewer than the 10 days, and all the answers to that were no. So here's our sort of proposal incorporating in the requirements the state has provided for us. So we're asking staff to return Monday, August 24th. That is a day prior than we had planned even before the COVID. We were asking staff originally to come to work on Tuesday, August 25th, but the changes by the state, we're asking them to come back on Monday, August 24th. We're looking at to start, when people come back, to start with safety training protocols and preparation. Again, everyone needs to be fitted with their masks. We're going to have someone from the, I believe, the fire department help us look at proper mask fitting. I think we have to go over COVID symptoms, and we have to go over all the safety protocols with all staff. And that'll be the focus of our first 5 days. Obviously, people aren't going to sit for 6 hours. We're going to have other training that we need to do, other instructional training. We'll try to break it up. But again, it's those first 5 days, Monday, August 25th through Friday, August 28th would be the first block of 5 days of the 10 that we would have for training. Burlington, in our teacher's contract, happens to have a teacher setup day. So what we would propose is having the Monday, August 31st be the teacher setup day. So after an initial 5 days of training, teachers have that Monday with the knowledge they have of the safety protocols to set up their classrooms. And then the following 5 days, Tuesday, September 1st through Thursday, September 3rd, would be more professional development in terms of remote teaching skills, potentially some class introductions. We may have some in-person instruction for some of our high-need students. happening during that second block of 5 days. We may have some students start early. We are closed Friday, September 4th, the Friday before Labor Day by contract. And then Tuesday, September 8th and Wednesday, September 9th, again, we'll continue and we'll end the 10 days that the state is requiring us to have training in, and we would still have some in-person instruction for our high needs students. Bob, next slide, please. So the 10 days the state is asking, requiring us to install into the start of the school year, and the one teacher setup day that is a part of a Burlington contract takes us to Thursday, September 10th. And we would say Thursday, September 10th would be the first day of school for students. And what we would like to propose is that's a Thursday. So we would like to see that be the first day in person for grades 1 through 5, grades 6 and grade 9. Our grade 6 students and our grade 9 students have not been at the middle school or high school previously. So we'd like to spend some time introducing those students to those schools, and doing this sort of in a COVID environment. The first thing, we're hoping to minimize the stress. The first day for students remotely is going to be, again, that Thursday, but it's going to be remote for grades 7, 8, and 10 through 12. And then on Monday, September 14th would be the first day for students in the Early Childhood Center and our kindergarten students. And then again, all students would schedule that the school committee allows in person. We would start, again, all students on Monday, September 14th in person on their rotation. Again, that would be half the students in terms of middle and high. And then all elementary students, including K, would start on Monday, September 14th. So it's a bit of a staggered start. Again, our official first day would be Thursday, September 10th, but we're starting some students in person, grades 1 through 5, 6 and 9. We're starting some students remotely. That's grades 7 and 8 and 10 through 12. And we're saying that we'd like the early childhood and K to start on Monday, September 14th. Next slide, Bob. I just want to take 1 second to talk about in-person learning. In-person learning is what you would imagine a typical school day to be. That's when everyone shows up and is teaching in person. It's relatively self-explanatory. We're talking about hybrid, and a hybrid is going to be in-person plus a distance learning component. So actually, all of our levels have a distance learning component to that. And that was really important for us because we would like our teachers and students to continue to learn remotely in case we have to shut the buildings down and go fully remote. And again, the next option, fully remote, is basically online learning. That's where the students are not getting in-person instruction, but they're getting online learning. And it may be the case that if the school committee votes for a fully remote environment in the fall, we may still need to bring in certain high need students for some in-person services. So again, any situation we have, I believe we'll have some students in the building in the fall. Bob, next slide, please. Just an important point. I think I've talked about distance learning and online learning, synchronous and asynchronous. This has to do with online learning. A synchronous lesson is where the teacher would be live on her computer and the students would be live on the other side. So that would be learning that's happening again with a live teacher. So people who are experiencing this presentation and watching me live, this is a synchronous experience. If anyone is recording it and they watched it tomorrow when they had time or they had trouble sleeping, that would be an asynchronous experience because I wouldn't be live. One of the things that we really tried to do with our proposal is make sure that our hybrid and remote schedules have the same structure, because one of the state's priorities is that we be able to move from in-person to remote smoothly, unlike in the spring. And so when we discuss our schedules today, and when we show our schedules today, please keep in mind that our remote experience is going to have a very similar structure than our in-person hybrid that we are proposing. Next slide, please. Some of the requirements for remote learning, we haven't spoken a lot about. These are the state requirements, is if we're going to have all students participate in remote learning, we need to have the procedure to do that, and including a system for tracking attendance and participation. Unlike in the spring, we're going to be taking attendance, and we need to be keeping track and evaluating student participation in the remote learning environment. Remote academic work is aligned to state standards, so it's the state's expectation that we're going to be teaching to the standards as opposed to just reviewing or focusing on other aspects of student learning. We need to have an attendance policy to work on if we're fully remote. Again, students need to be present. And the state is also requiring that teachers and administrators regularly communicate with students, parents, and guardians. So there needs to be, again, regular communication. There's a priority placed on synchronous instruction, and we're going to need to take attendance and keep track of who's participating. And again, there's going to be feedback and grading associated with remote learning, a very different experience than the spring. Next slide, Bob. So some of the remote learning options, again, we need to have remote learning options, even if we have an in-person option at the conclusion of this evening. So again, any in-person option is just accompanying a remote learning option. I'll state again, parents can choose to keep their children home if they choose, and these are some of the remote options that are available to us. We're talking about creating a Burlington Public Schools remote team. And again, this educational team will provide instruction for students who remain fully remote. We would attempt to match students and their curricular needs with the teachers. We would look to teachers who cannot return to in-person teaching for the reasons that are allowed by the federal government, and we're really working on that on a case-by-case basis. So we would try to match the students who are not returning with the teachers who aren't returning and see if we can create some alignment there. Obviously, this is challenging because the complexity, we can't choose who's not returning, what students. We have licensing challenges, enrollment numbers, again, and individual student needs. So we have lots of unknowns. One of the reasons we're asking teachers to let us know about their individual situations and families to let us know about their individual children is so that we can try to match up a remote learning team with students who want to remain fully remote. Expectation would be that the fully remote team would still follow many of the schedules that I'm going to go over, or the structure of the schedules that I'm going to be going over when we start talking about an in-person return. But one option, again, for fully remote is a Burlington Public Schools remote learning team. Teachers will not be able to plan and create remote lessons and deliver synchronous remote instruction at the same time they're delivering in-person instruction. Again, they can't do that two different ways. Next slide, please. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, that's what DESE stands for, are also providing remote learning options. Massachusetts has 2 virtual schools that are approved by the state. One is called the Greenfield Virtual School. The other is called Tech Academy. The state has contracted with Greenfield and TECA to provide fully remote online classes. These classes are both synchronous and asynchronous. Students can take single courses or bundled courses. The courses include teachers, and students who are taking the individual courses or bundled courses, they do stay enrolled in Burlington Public Schools. Students can also enroll in these schools completely. And if they were to enroll in these schools completely, then they would unenroll from Burlington Public Schools, but the state has, again, negotiated because of the COVID situation that students can take singled or bundled courses from these schools and remain enrolled in the district as a possibility. And it may be a mechanism for us to fill in holes if we don't have a complete Burlington remote learning team for us to fill in holes in terms of a student's academic program. Next slide, Bob. The next remote learning option that the state is providing, again, and we just got this guidance last week, is they're saying that they've contracted with Edgenuity in the Florida Virtual School to provide fully remote online classes. Again, this is synchronous and asynchronous. They have courses that range from K to 12. It may include instructors. Again, I think most of these courses are just content. They're not providing an instructor. So if we have a teacher who may be out of her license area, we still may be able to provide a content of a course through one of these programs. And then the Burlington teacher may just help the student make progress through one of these courses. The students who are enrolled in these courses do remain, again, in Burlington Public Schools. They remain in the district. And the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, DESE, is providing professional development in these areas. All of these options are brand new. So we're looking at some of those possibilities. And again, it's all going to depend how many students are choosing fully remote, how many teachers are choosing fully remote, if the school committee votes to have some in-person learning. If we don't have any in-person learning, then all of these fully remote options will be available in a way for us to provide instruction for students who are fully remote. Next slide, Bob. Oh, and again, all come at a price. None of this is free. So we would certainly need to look at the price and how we would make that work. So now I'm moving away from fully remote options and I'm going into our schedules. And again, I went about this a little bit backwards from some of our neighboring districts, which I certainly have heard about. I wanted to start at the school level so we could create concrete schedules from which to work. I think there was a lot of theories, a lot of background, a lot of sort of national and international health information. But what it boiled down to me is, what is a student day? What could it possibly look like? And I wanted to get that information out to staff and families as soon as possible. So we started with administrator and teacher teams. We had put money in the budget, and all of our teams had a team representing sort of every grade and subject area. We had special educators, we had nurses, and these groups met frequently and created schedules, again, from a classroom perspective. So scheduling is a real, takes a lot of expertise, and we have expert schedulers in our principals and in some of our staff members. And I wanted to make sure that we had concrete examples for people to respond to. We did get some initial parent feedback through school councils and PTOs. And again, there were several meetings of school councils and that we did get feedback on. And then we have shared the draft schedules with the district working group, and we're looking at district challenges. So to the school committee, these schedules haven't been created in isolation. We have had lots of input, and I just wanted to make sure tonight we presented some concrete possibilities. But I just want to restate, you're not voting on schedules tonight. The vote tonight is only if you are going to allow an in-person option and for us to continue planning an in-person option for the fall. Again, parents can choose a fully remote option if they don't like any of our in-person options moving forward. Next slide, please. I just wanted to, I think this slide is actually a little bit out of order, so I apologize for that. The feedback that we got from the spring was parents were looking for more structure, more consistency, more content, and more feedback from teachers. All that's built into the remote learning options that I discussed. We are planning on sending iPads home with every student. We are not believing that the remote experience will be completely screen-based. We'll have other materials. and again, other possibilities for students, both synchronous and asynchronous, but there will be a priority placed on synchronous instruction, live instruction for our remote learning. And again, and we're still looking at forming a remote teaching team. And one teacher's idea, again, from a prior presentation was, could they deliver remote instruction from their classrooms as an option? And we're fully supporting that as an option. So Bob, next slide, please. All right, I'm going to go through these options at each level relatively simply. What I wanted to say is we just to remind everyone that we're exceeding the guidelines in these models in regards to social distancing and mask wearing, where we are requiring all students and our staff to wear masks in terms of all of our planning. And we are really trying to stick to that 6 feet of social distancing. And again, depending on whether we need some additional class sections, we do have them posted just in case, but it's obviously going to depend on the number of students who return to in-person, if the school committee would allow students to return to in-person. Most parents want to hear directly from their principal or their school. I'm going to be going over some basics, but if the school committee votes to allow in-person learning, then a lot of the communication coming up this week to individual school families will be coming from principals and at the school level, and they'll be getting into much more detail in terms of their exact schedules and answering any questions you have about their exact schedules. So again, the point of tonight is just to show what a possible in-person return would be if we go back, if we're allowed to go back in the fall. So again, the Early Childhood Center, starting with preschool, Bob. Next slide, please. Again, we're going to have devices available for students at home. There's obviously a focus at that age and at all ages that should be on social, emotional, and physical health. Always looking to balance screen time with robust learning opportunities. Again, I think snack was removed. Deb Clark, our early childhood director, is contacting all families who are involved in the early childhood. She'll be seeking feedback. And again, we're talking about adjusting the tuition for neighborhood students. There are many communities that I'm aware of that are only providing their mandated services. They're not providing space for neighborhood children. And we are really working hard to maintain our neighborhood childhood program, early childhood program. Next slide, Bob. So planning on having an A and a B group again. Sessions will run Monday through Friday, 8:10 to 11. I'm sure there are parents who are very specifically interested in the early childhood program. Specifically, you'll be getting this information from Deb Clark in terms of moving forward. We are talking about having a hybrid program where we are allowing neighborhood students in, 3-day program, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on alternating week schedules. This is, again, just a proposal, but I wanted to present a concrete proposal to demonstrate that we can implement our safety guidelines and provide an in-person experience. We believe we can do that in the fall. And again, there are well thought out plans at every level. So even looking at providing a remote experience, again, where neighborhood students can join the classrooms remotely for morning meeting and circle time, again, as we move forward. So really looking at a different experience from the spring, where we're going to have more synchronous opportunities and a more structured day. Next slide, please. Just want to point out that at every level, including the early childhood, we are building in time. Some parents had questions how we would monitor hand washing. We are actually building in time in a lot of our schedules for hand washing and for hand sanitizing. And so you can see there are mask breaks built in. There are bathroom times, as is always built in, but we're also including sometimes even at the high school, for instance, larger passing times between classes so students can wash or sanitize their hands. Next slide, please. Um, As with many of our plans, we're looking for students to have, at least initially, have lunch at home. I'll talk more about that specifically at the elementary level. And again, I think with the preschool, we're saying some related services and telepractice can happen remotely in the afternoon. And we're trying to incorporate some instruction in a hybrid way. So if our buildings have to close, then students and teachers will have some practice remotely. I think we need to be prepared to close our schools depending on what the virus does. I think we also can be prepared to expand our in-person instruction if things go well and we're advised that we can continue to expand our in-person learning. So again, you will be getting, the early childhood families and parents will be getting more specific communication from Deb Clark this week. Next slide, please. Again, Bob, next slide, please. We're just going through some of the different programs. Again, all this will be made public. Bob, next slide, please. So next steps, we need to, again, we need the school committee decision so that we can either communicate to parents and staff that we'll be fully remote or communicate our in-person options. There is a lot of contact with our preschool families, both in regular ed and special ed. We need to ask if they'll be attending in person or remotely. Again, we need to continue to develop schedules for our high need students. High need students are defined by the state. There's a definition. We need to continue to refine our remote learning instruction. And again, I'm going to say it 18 times. The remote learning experience is going to be different than in the spring. And then we just need to continue to have staff training to make sure that our remote learning, even the remote learning that's incorporated with a hybrid return, is as high quality as possible. Next slide, please. We'll again briefly go through elementary. Elementary parents will be getting communication from their respective school. Again, if the school committee votes for an in-person return, we'll be communicating more directly with families at each level in more detail. Next slide, please. So opportunities and challenges. Lunch scheduling has really provided a challenge for us, and we are not starting the school year in person with a lunch. And the lunch is we can't serve students in a large group. We can't use our cafeterias. So we are looking to start the year by sending students home for lunch. But that doesn't mean at some later date, if we get our routines down and we're believing the routines are learning and students are following and the mask wearing protocols and our virus counts stay low, we would be looking to add lunch and expand our in-person learning time. We believe if we start slowly and cautiously with in-person, that it's more likely that our buildings will stay open longer. It may take us several weeks just to get the arrival and dismissal procedures down while maintaining social distancing with the kids. And then one of the challenges, again, that we face is our instructional grouping that we do a lot, our response to intervention program. We're not going to be mixing kids. They're going to be staying in their classrooms, their homeroom groups. And so some of the instructional grouping that we've done for the last 10 years is going to be put on hold during the COVID time. Opportunities we're exploring, again, using outdoor areas. We do have one-to-one iPads available for home use. We've never sent the iPads home with elementary students, which we're going to be doing. And we're looking for some consistency of the digital learning and communication platforms. I think that was a real consistent feedback from parents from the spring is less is more in terms of our digital learning and communication platform. So we're looking to move that all under single options and providing some training. Next slide, Bob. Again, just one possible example. We just wanted to make it as concrete as possible. Again, school committee members, you're not voting on this particular schedule, but we wanted to show what a hybrid would look like. That would be all students 5 days a week, sending the students home for lunch. We would have a 4 days a week, we would have a remote lesson in the afternoon. So the school day would still be a full school day. It would run roughly from, say, 8:10 to 2:30 or 8:30 to 2:30. The hours would be structured, again, unlike in the spring. There would be an in-person every day and also a remote lesson 4 days out of the week. We need one of the afternoons for planning and for teacher meetings. So we're talking about having a remote content 4 afternoons a week. That content may change depending on the day and again, on teacher planning. But maintaining a remote lesson every day would help us if we have to switch to fully remote. If the buildings are shut down again, we're sort of maintaining and expanding those skills. If students are fully remote, we're intending to keep the structure of the day very similar. So again, we'll be taking attendance in the morning. There would be synchronous teaching, and we would very much follow the schedule of a school day, whether the students are in school or whether the students are remote. Another thing I just wanted to highlight is you'll see in yellow, maintaining specials is something that was one of our guiding principles and very important. We feel those subject areas are important for the students. We're looking at how to deliver specials. That continues to be a challenge, but we're committed to offering specials every day for our students. So students aren't going to be sitting in the classroom, in other words, for 3 or 4 hours. They're going to be up, they're going to be outside, they're going to be experiencing a special, there's going to be transitions. So there will be movement within the classroom, but we're trying not to move the kids throughout the building. Next slide, Bob. Again, next step, we need to further define specialist schedules. I think we need to do, according to the principal, some high needs scheduling in particular. And we need to continue to develop a 100% remote learning program. Again, it would follow the same structure as the hybrid program, but if the school committee votes us to return 100% remotely, we would need to make some changes in the schedule, but we would still prioritize, again, a school day experience, and the teaching would be largely synchronous. Next slide. Let's look at the middle school briefly. Bob, next slide, please. Again, opportunities and challenges. Opportunities, according to the middle school, or to accelerate an advisory program, which I think is a great idea. Accelerate iReady, which is a screening, a universal screener we use at the elementary level. We're expanding that into grades 6, 7, and 8. And that not only has a screening tool, but has a curricular tool that is aligned with the screening tool. So looking to expand that. Middle school students, like elementary students, will be taking home their devices for the first time as an entire school. And again, the consistency of some of our learning management systems, Google Classroom, we're really trying to narrow the tools that teachers are using. So the teacher training and parent training will be easier. Again, the challenges are it's adjusting to the program of studies that the middle school just had adopted a new schedule, and we were just sort of getting used to the schedule, and we're now having to rethink that schedule completely. There's an adjustment to world language just because of the need to group the kids into cohorts. And again, these are from the middle school administrative team, a lack of preferred peer grouping. And we are keeping lunch at the middle school because we wanted to have one level where we're serving lunch so that we can see if we can do it and we can manage it safely and figure out all the logistics. And if we can manage it safely, then again, we would look to learn from our experience at the middle school, get our cafeteria staff trained, our custodial staff in terms of cleaning out the rooms. And then if we can figure out all the details, then we would look to expand lunch to the other areas. But again, this was all about starting small and making sure that we're doing things safely. Bob, next slide. Again, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it, just demonstrating that we have a cohort that's going to be split in half. This would be a sample student schedule where Monday and Tuesday they would be in person. One of the things I wanted to clarify that came from one of our district working groups is a parent commented, so my child's in school Monday and Tuesday, and then Wednesday and Thursday, Friday look like the spring. And I just wanted to make sure that I say that's absolutely not the case. Again, children will be in if they're in cohort A on Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, they will be distance learners, meaning they won't be in school. But there's still a tremendous amount of structure to the day, and the majority of that structure is synchronous. So they still need to get up. We still need to take attendance. We still need to make sure that we're accountable for that time. They'll be participating in some virtual classes. There'll be office hours. They'll have their specials, their allied arts during that time. They might have one asynchronous activity. That would be the iReady Math and iReady English Language Arts. And then they would have world language. So again, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are not simply just unattended time. The students will be accounted for, and the school day will be basically following the same hours. If we're forced to go fully remote, again, these schedules can be adapted, but I think the structure of the day would be largely the same. So again, there would be school happening every day between roughly 7:40 and 1:55. Again, we are keeping lunch at the middle school, so the Monday and Tuesday are full days. And hopefully, if we have some success, we'll be looking at adding lunch at some of the other areas. Bob, next slide. Again, there's a core teacher schedule that's a part of this. We wanted to provide both a teacher and a student schedule. Bob, next slide. And we have an allied arts schedule. So again, parents and staff of the middle school administration will be sharing this information in more detail, specifically, again, to middle school folks in the coming week. So Bob, next slide, please. Again, we need to further refine. These are the next steps for the middle school. Allied arts, specialist schedules are something that we're going to have to continue to revisit. High needs scheduling, similar to the elementary school. Cohort assignment, we're looking to try to match the high school, and we have to do something a little bit more than alphabetical, just because some last names don't match up, and there may be some other factors in place. And then we also need to continue to develop our 100% learning program. But we do have again, a possible in-person schedule that does follow the state guidelines, and with the enhancement that we talked about in regards to mask wearing and social distancing. Next slide, please, Bob. And I promise I'm almost to the end. Burlington High School, Bob, next slide. Opportunities and challenges, again, looking at an opportunity in terms of flex block and advising. In terms of with the split classes, looking at smaller class sizes for more individualized instruction and project-based learning. We need to have flexibility if we need to shift again from hybrid to remote. That's in the back of our minds the entire time. If we have to shut our buildings down, or if the school committee wants to vote for a fully remote, we have a lot of our scheduling planning done already. We will have to make some adjustments, but the basic structure would be the same. And we have different access points throughout the week to make sure we're checking on students in terms of their social emotional growth. Some of the challenges is the high school had a new schedule proposal for this year that's being derailed for a little while. A lot of planning went into that. And so I know there's a sense of loss there. Hybrid schedule, the logistics are going to be challenging just because of the newness. Curriculum scope and sequence, having half the kids in and the other half in, again, are going to provide some challenges, especially for getting through the same amount of content, if that's even possible. There'll be a high demand on teachers, again, depending on who's available to teach in person, And if any staff members have to be isolated for a period of time, we have some highly specialized teachers at the high school level. And so filling in for those teachers is always difficult, even in a non-COVID environment. Again, the students miss out on a lot of the in-person high school experiences, which again is not ideal for anyone. We all know that in-person learning is our best option, and high school also. I know there are going to be some questions about extracurricular opportunities for students. We have no guidance yet on sports. We've heard there's not going to be any decision made until September 14th. So anyone who asked that question, I'm going to say I don't know. And we'll know more on September 14th. And for other extracurricular opportunities, I think we're evaluating them on a case-by-case basis. There may be some student clubs that can meet remotely, and we're just evaluating them differently than we would in a normal year. But we're going to try to have the students have as many experiences as they possibly can in a hybrid model or in a fully remote model. Next slide, please. So again, wanting to provide a sample student schedule as a concrete example. You can see cohort A on Monday and Tuesday. You can see cohort A and B together remotely on Wednesday. And then cohort A would remain out of school on Thursday and Friday. And then cohort B would come in. So it's really a 5-day rotation where students are in 2 days and they're out of school 3 days. Wednesday is a shared remote day, again with teacher planning and office hours and time for meetings on Wednesday afternoons. The periods are slightly longer and extended than they would normally be. You can see the 7-period rotation over the course of the 2 days. We are not keeping the kids for lunch at the high school initially, but it's certainly something we can look at and talk about depending on our success. And we need to continue to provide lunches for our food insecure students, whether we're serving lunch as a whole or not. And that's something we need to continue to plan for. So again, there's 10-minute passing time. If you look at that, much longer than normal. In terms of to allow for distancing in the hallways and for we'll have more hand sanitizing stations and high traffic areas. The students will be released before lunch, but they'll have the option of picking up a grab and go lunch. The flex block is opportunities for enrichment advisory, and students would be expected to attend that. Wednesday classes meet remotely for 30 minutes, and that's synchronous. So that's with the teacher live on the other end. Again, unlike potentially in the spring. And then Wednesday afternoons, we're looking for times for educators to meet. Buildings will be cleaned on Wednesday afternoons between cohort A and cohort B. They're cleaned every day, but we're going to be doing some sort of extra cleaning on Wednesday afternoons in between the different cohorts. And then again, as we discussed at the preschool, elementary, and middle school, if we are forced to go fully remote, the schedule will stay basically the same, except the cohorts would be together and students would have live classes 3 times per week. So again, the same whether we are allowed an in-person or we're forced to remote, either by school committee vote or the buildings are closed. Next slide, Bob. So high school next steps is we need to further define the remote schedule and the remote options that I went through. Again, some of those remote options were just added last week. High need scheduling, that's been consistent at every grade. We need to make sure we do that. That means some students will be attending more than the 2 days. They may be attending all 5 days, and we're going to be working with Mary Hood and the special ed department to make sure that we're looking at our high needs student population differently in terms of scheduling, and we have the opportunity to do that. Cohort assignment like the middle school, we're going to try to match the high school and the middle school in terms of cohort assignment. And then we need to look at 100% remote learning program development again, and that's been mentioned consistently throughout. So again, we have a foundation from which to build a 100% remote learning program. The structure of the day would essentially stay the same. The time commitment for staff would essentially be the same, whether you're in person or remote, and the same would be for students. We're expecting students to be scheduled basically for the same hours that school is scheduled, typically without COVID being part of our planning. The next steps, next slide, please, Bob. These are the district next steps. We're going to continue to meet with our district working groups. We are going to encourage staff to complete the surveys that they've received, and that survey went out to all staff, not just teachers. We're going to be sending out a second parent survey. We're hoping tomorrow, depending on the school committee vote this evening. And we also need to define for parents a transitioning process between remote and in-person. Some parents have asked, if I choose to start all remote and the district does a decent job and I have more confidence, can I have my child switch to an in-person? The answer is yes. It may take us, it may not be instantaneous, but we're not going to restrict families from doing that. It may take us a week. We're looking at all of our spacing models based on all students attending school. So we should be able to absorb students back in and maintain our social distancing. But again, we're just asking that you be patient if you want to go from remote to in person. If you're a parent who starts in person, if we're allowed to do that and you want to go fully remote, obviously we'll allow that transition, and that transition should be somewhat easier. But again, if people are transitioning between remote and in person, again, we're not going to restrict that, but we just need to come up with a process so that parents know what that process is. And it may not be instantaneous in terms of my child's been remote on Tuesday and I want them to start in school on Wednesday, where we are not going to be able to sort of accommodate that, but probably within a week or two's time, we can make the change for people. We're doing Thursday night BCAT presentations. This Thursday, Dennis Villano is going to be focusing on educational technology and remote learning in more depth. August 14th, our full documents are submitted to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And that is a final decision regarding the fall. When I say final decision, that's a final decision into the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in terms of their deadline. Nothing would preclude the school committee from getting more health data, working with the Board of Health as the opening of school becomes closer. And if the context has changed, then the school committee could change their recommendation at that time. We are always planning a remote option for students because we have to offer a remote student for every family who wants a full remote option. And as I tried to demonstrate this evening, there's a remote part of every in-person plan that we are proposing. BCAT on next Thursday. A week from this Thursday, we're going to have Barbara Conley, our nurse leader, talking about some of the expectations for parents in terms of the health screening that they need to provide for their children and some of the COVID protocols that families have been asking that they want to see. Again, those protocols only make sense and the parent screenings only make sense if we are having a in-person return to school, which is why we needed to wait for the school committee's decision tonight. Bob, I think that's it for me. And next steps, again, my recommendation is a remote and hybrid. I'd like to continue our hybrid planning, our in-person planning for the next several weeks. Our local positivity rates are about 1%. I'd like to provide families a choice. Again, the choice to stay fully remote is there, whether you allow students back or not. I think it allows students most negatively impacted by remote learning to have an in-person experience. I think it takes advantage of good weather and, again, a low local positivity data. That means if we can have our relationship started, unlike last year when teachers knew their students, had been working with their students all the way up until March, we're going to be forming new relationships. And if we can do some of that in person and grab even a few weeks of in-person if we're closed afterwards, I think those few weeks will prove to be beneficial. Again, and that gets to my next point, is just let a relationship start in person because they're critical. And I think a hybrid in-person schedule provides a foundation that can be expanded to include more in-person. It also, having those structures would allow us to switch to fully remote if the buildings are closed. So I think having a hybrid allows us to move in either direction, and we need to be prepared to move in either direction. So again, my recommendation to the school committee, and I tried to provide as many concrete examples as I could to talk about some of the planning that's taken place. And I know I've talked for quite a long time with you, but again, I'm recommending that the school committee allow us to continue to plan a hybrid, and for us to continue to plan a remote to as a foundation for opening in the fall. So with that, that concludes my presentation. And again, thank you for your patience in listening to me.
Thank you, Eric. Nice job. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. First thing I'd like to do is ask Mr. Murphy for a motion to get this on the floor.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
I want a motion to get this on the floor.
I'd make a motion that the school committee adopt the administration's proposed reopening schedule or plan.
Is there a second?
I'll second it. Martha.
Okay, thanks. Now, usually what we do is we have the committee discuss things, and then we go to the Ways and Means Committee, and then we go to the public. We're going to do it a little differently this time. We're going to have some comments from the public before the committee discusses it. I'd just like to give a little preamble by saying that I hope that most of your questions were answered by the superintendent's presentation. We will try to keep this down to about a half hour because the committee really needs to discuss it in some detail, and it's already getting to be a long meeting. So individuals will be given up to 3 minutes to speak. People who live or work in Burlington, please. If your question has been answered in the presentation, maybe don't ask it because you already know, and please do not repeat questions that have been asked by other people. Try to, move on with new topics. So from my perspective, I would just like to say that this is a very important topic for all of us. We're all trying to do the right thing, whether it's parents, teachers, citizens, school committee members. I really hope we can have a productive discussion. It's clear that there are options that if you are not interested in sending your children to school, you can have a remote option. So I'm just hoping that we can all work together on this and have some, make some points, but let's not carry it on too long so the committee can discuss it. So in your in the chat, please, if you wish to speak at this point in time on the topic of return to school, please just put your name, nothing else, just your name in the chat. So while we're waiting, okay, Crystal, oh, wait a minute. I guess they're all popping up at once. Let me see who signed on first.
I think Michelle Smith signed on first. You see where
Yeah, that was earlier, right?
No,
Okay, Michelle Smith.
I think this round started with Michelle and then Jennifer Priest and then Diana Marcus, and that I think that's the beginning of your list. So can you see that?
Yes. Okay, Michelle Smith, please.
I'm Michelle Smith, a parent at Fox Hill. We all want schools to reopen safely and sustainably. However, we cannot open under current conditions. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, schools that have reopened without subsequent surges in COVID-19 have been in countries that have achieved less than 1 new case per day per 100,000 people. As of Friday, Massachusetts was at 5.5 new cases per day per 100,000. Countries that have been successful have also started with K through 5 students, waited to assess community transmission, and then later sent older students back. The plan being voted on is for all grades to go back at once. The Parabola project has not yet published air filtration best practices for COVID-19. Given the wide range of building ages, window designs, lack of vents and/or windows in some classrooms, and vents that recirculate air through multiple classrooms, it's not clear how the 30% sample for BPS can be representative and what standards the results will be judged against. At the July 21st school committee meeting, Dr. Conti stated that educators' laptops are replaced every 3 years. Educators are hearing differently. Educators need laptops with working cameras, the ability to use Google Meet, Seesaw, and Google Classroom, and the ability to edit videos. I've been told directly about a single parent who teaches in our school system who got a loan from their credit union to get a MacBook to teach online after their Chromebook failed, an educator who was constantly getting dropped from Google Meets, which affected student attendance, an educator who has a Chromebook that has passed the auto update expiration date and is no longer receiving operation system or security patches from Google, meaning that student data on this laptop may be at risk and it may no longer work with Google's educational applications. And finally, an educator's laptop camera that only works if the screen is set at a certain angle. The school committee should assess whether BPS is prepared with technology and IT governance to support hybrid and remote learning. Dr. Conti also mentioned considering remote learning third-party vendors vetted by DESE. I'm concerned about how the schools will keep students involved in their school communities, which supports their social emotional well-being, as well as service IEPs and 504s with their existing teams, while outsourcing their education to charter schools and corporations that are outside the community. I hope that BPS will work with their own educators to make the remote learning experience as appealing as possible, to reduce the number of students in schools and keep in-person students and staff safer. Finally, I propose that BPS add an 11th principle on equity and access. Recognizing that schools must address the needs of the whole child, the COVID-19 Healthcare Coalition suggests prioritizing students for return when it is not yet safe for all students to return, based on socioeconomic factors, difficulty with remote learning, and family situations such as children of essential workers and single-parent households. BPS should consider this. 35% of students in BPS are non-white. The CDC notes there's increasing evidence that some racial and ethnic minority groups are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Massing's poll found that Black and Latino parents have a much lower level of confidence than white and Asian parents that schools could reopen safely. BPS needs to prioritize getting data and input from traditionally marginalized populations in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So what we're trying to do is listen to everyone, and when we speak, if we have comments to address each of the speakers, we'll have notes. So it's any of those points, please keep notes and get to it when we discuss it. The next person is Jennifer Priest.
Evening. I've been listening and following along for a while now. We're kind of up in the air on which way we want to go. And as a parent, I do have some concerns with the continuation of education. I know Dr. Conti has talked about if we have to shut down the schools. But one of my concerns that comes up is there's going to be additional health screenings. Kids are going to be sent home more often. There's going to be higher absentee. And what is the plan to keep those students engaged in school because they have allergies and they have a cough for a month? And I understand you don't want them in school, and it makes complete sense, but how is their education going to be maintained during those times when they can't physically be in school, when they have to quarantine because they have symptoms but not diagnosed with COVID?
They go remote is the simple answer, but do you have anything else you wanted to add?
I know the last time when I asked about will children be able to jump onto remote if they have to quarantine, the answer was it's not that simple. So that's why I'm asking this question at this time, because it's definitely a huge factor in deciding whether or not the continuation of a continuous education is more important than getting that little bit of in-person experience. And exposure.
Okay, thank you. I know I have it written down. Dr. Connie, please keep a note of questions that come up so we can answer them. The next person on the list is Diana on behalf of the BEA.
Thank you. We're speaking out publicly tonight to clearly state our position and reasoning with regards to opening school in September. The BEA is made up of more than 400 educators who work in the Burlington Public Schools. Some of our members live right here in Burlington, while others live in neighboring communities. Many of our members are parents with children who attend public school here and across the region. Like everyone else, our understanding of this virus has changed and evolved as we've learned more about the virus. Although some of our concerns are being heard, we don't feel that the guidelines and resources provided are enough to keep everyone safe. Educators in Burlington miss our students, and we are eager to resume learning in person. Classroom learning is how education is supposed to be. We know that this spring's crisis learning was not ideal for our students and their families. It was not how anyone wanted to finish the school year. We pride ourselves on our ability to build personal relationships with our students. Our greatest collective obligations, however, are to keep students, educators, families, and communities out of harm's way and to prevent a resurgence of COVID-19 in our community. We want everyone who starts school on the first day to be there on the last day. The hybrid model, which is currently proposed by the district, is not a return to school in the traditional sense that we know. Children as young as 5 years old will be asked to sit in desks spaced 4 to 5 feet apart from their peers and teachers. They will not be able to hug their teachers when they're sad, high-five a classmate, play tag at recess, or sit together to collaborate in small groups. Meanwhile, educators are going to spend their instructional time reviewing protocols, reminding students about masks safety, ensuring proper distancing, and allowing for hand washing and mask breaks. Nothing will feel the same. With other educators in our region, we have called for a phased-in start to the school year, where students begin with a comprehensive remote learning experience and then transition into the hybrid model, only when public health data indicates that it can be done safely. Finally, to our families, you know us. We are your children's teachers, counselors, nurses, and advocates. You know the passion we have for working with your children. So you also know how hard it is for us to think about beginning school without seeing them walk through the door. Our hearts want nothing more than to be back in the schools, setting up our classrooms just like we were a year ago. However, our heads know that we can't do that right now. As educators, we always tell our students one of our most important jobs is to keep them safe in all manners of the word. And never has that sentiment been more real than it is now. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana. The next person is Julia Carey.
Thank you for having me speak tonight. I have a little checklist that I would just like to read. I fully support full remote in the beginning because we can always move to a hybrid when we know it's safer.
Having trouble hearing you. Can you get closer to the microphone?
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to remind everybody, when we first closed school back in March, there were only 12 people dead in the United States, and we closed the schools. We shut everything down. Now we are at 163,000 plus, and we want to open schools. I don't think it's a wise idea. The air quality in our buildings, especially in our science departments, is not healthy, nor it will be until the HVAC systems are corrected. Right at the moment, according to the hybrid schedule that is out before you, we will not be meeting with the students 3 times a week. We will be meeting with them 2 times a week for a total of 80 minutes. I would suggest we look at that and revisit the scheduling, and we do 5 days a week. Attendance and grades are both they need to count. The other thing that came to my mind today is that the viral load of younger students is massive. So if we're looking at the younger students, say in the first grade, sixth grade, They now have 100,000 positive cases confirmed by the students. My next thing is that as you guys read a letter from me last week or the week before, when I was studying the Ebola virus years ago in 1995, it was actually found to be transmitted through the air. We do not have enough information about the coronavirus. If it is transmitted through the air and we are in the buildings, we are subjecting teachers and students to a serious, deadly potential for the coronavirus. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Steve Perry?
Hi, can you hear me, Christine?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Steve Perry. I'm the spouse of a faculty member and I have a child in the district. I want to start by saying, look, I appreciate the transparency of Burlington. I understand this is a difficult, confusing, and stressful time, and I really appreciate, the efforts to keep all of us informed. I want to circle back around to something that was said earlier on this call, which was that Burlington is emphasizing a balanced approach to the various risk factors involved in returning to class. While I fully acknowledge that there's no perfect answer or option, I would say that in my opinion, the risk is not balanced for an in-person return at this point, whether it's full-time, whether it's hybrid, or remote if it requires teachers to be on premise. The risk entailed in any of these is asymmetric. And what I mean by that is that in-person activity increases the risk of severe illness or death. There's no going back on death. Even if only one student or faculty member at risk, one is too many. We need to address the other risks as well. I'm not saying we should ignore them. I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form. But mandatory in-person interaction is still too risky. And it's one risk that we should have zero tolerance for, is death. In my opinion, there's simply too much uncertainty to ask our students or faculty to risk their lives returning to school, even if it's only a handful or dozen of people across the district that are statistically at risk of severe illness or death. That is too many. We still don't fully understand how the virus is transmitted. We don't fully understand why it impacts some people more than others. We don't have a consistent method of treatment that reduces the risk of death or severe illness. At the same time, what I would add is that monitoring the virus is very difficult and it's not real time. While it may be easy to get a test, it can take a week or more to get the results back. That is not acceptable. Lastly, and perhaps most concerning, is that research suggests the virus can spread even if people are asymptomatic. I want to emphasize that returning to school in person in any form and then planning on shutting it down if there is community spread implies that you're too late. The number of confirmed cases in the state is already ticking upwards and students are not even back yet. More and more children in other states are testing positive that reopened ahead of us, which we should all find very concerning. There are already communities right around Burlington where positive test rates are nearing the 5% threshold. That includes Everett, that includes Revere, I believe it includes Chelsea. Some of our families commute from these areas. That's not safe. Lastly, I want to add that I have serious concerns around daycare. There have been reports recently, including in the Wall Street Journal, that suggest children are more vulnerable to carrying and transmitting the disease than initially thought. Again, we simply don't know for sure. Our young children can't wear masks, they can't social distance, they inevitably share objects. The risk of them getting sick or spreading the virus to their grandparents, parents, etc., is simply too much of a risk. To bring this full circle and wrap up here, I don't understand why it's not prudent to take a more cautious approach and open remotely. This will allow us to see how other districts do when they reopen. We can monitor the ones that do it with success, and we can monitor the ones that run into issues. This will inevitably give us valuable intel into how to proceed. Even if it's just a month or two of monitoring, we'll have a better understanding of the appropriate steps to take. Why be a guinea pig so much down the line? I just want to let me add one more thing here, please. I understand Governor Baker says the facts don't fully support remote schools. But the facts that we were told 5 months ago, like the CDC saying that there's no need to wear a mask, turned out to be fiction. I beg that we please be cautious until we have a better understanding of how to reopen with success. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Crystal Turnquist? Crystal, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we got it.
Sorry. I just want to begin by thanking Dr. Conti for all his hard work in developing these plans. I know they have not been an easy task with the guidelines from DESE and a lack of guidance on how to accomplish such an insurmountable task. I do have, and thank you for every Thursday, the must-see TV. It's very helpful as a parent. These are very difficult decisions that we have to make. I did have a question and a few concerns, and my question was, how often were you meeting with the Parabola Project to update your data? I didn't know if you were meeting weekly or daily or monthly. And then one concern I have is I think that mandating 6 feet apart, it should be mandated instead of a goal. And you have showed more than once about the diagram with the 2 hairdressers and how they were infected with COVID and they did not infect any of their clients. I think that is a very different situation from a classroom, especially with younger students who may not be wearing their mask correctly or being playing with them. So if they had 6 feet apart, I think it would make everyone feel a little bit more comfortable and give them a little bit more wiggle room. My second concern is the ventilation systems. I'm really anxious to see what comes out of that. I wish they were testing every classroom to make sure they were safe. And I am happy to hear that this plan is fluid based on data because we all know how rapidly things have been changing. And then lastly, I just wanted to address any teachers that are listening. I know that you all want to be back in your classroom, and I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, but we see you, we hear you, and in Burlington, we're so lucky to have such caring, loving teachers. So don't think that all the negative things being said on the parent network is how everyone feels. And we just want you to be returning to safe classrooms, whether it's the date intended or if we have to push it off to make sure it's safe for all of you. So that's all.
Thank you, Crystal. Say hi to your husband for me. Um, So Karen McGee?
Hi, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I currently have one child in the school system and another one entering into kindergarten in the fall. As everybody else has mentioned, I have numerous concerns with regards to school opening. So far, everyone's level of social distancing varies from person to person and family to family. And the places where there have been groups of people, there have also been an uptick in positive cases. The Summer Central program had cases and had to be shut down. There were a couple of other summer school programs in the state. They made it a week and they were shut down as well with positive cases. There were summer camps in other states that had to be shut down due to positive cases. We all agree that children should be back in school. However, only when it is safe for everyone to be back, and that includes teachers and staff, as well as the children that go to school and their families. All states have reopened in phases. I would like to see schools reopen the same way with a remote start, leading to a hybrid situation, given the conditions warrant that. We've heard tonight that we would be going remote at some point. My feeling is it would be detrimental on children socially and emotionally to be in school for a week or 2 or 3 or whatever it works out to be, and then shut down again. It would be very hard for children to learn a normal school experience and for teachers to be able to teach in a normal environment, as none of this is normal. They would be monitoring children for illness, making sure kids are keeping masks on, making sure they are staying socially distanced, and potentially cleaning and disinfecting, all while trying to teach. My question is, how much teaching can actually be done this way? Are kids going to benefit from sitting at a desk, not being allowed to have extracurricular activities? There's no lunch, there's no recess. You can't go over and talk to your friends. You have to sit there in that one spot. To me, that would set some children would be afraid to have any interaction with anybody else, wondering, are they going to get sick? If somebody takes the mask off, what is the protocol? Is that child made to be a remote student going further? Who makes that call? Who follows up on that to make sure the masks are being worn? How exactly monitored to make sure there aren't more than a couple of children in there at a time and to make sure the masks are being kept on while using the restroom.
Okay. We're going over time, so wrap it up, please.
Okay, yeah. Custodian training, is that being done? Are masks being implemented for all staff, including working there during the summer? The last thing anybody wants to see is the school is already infected with COVID before any students return. I'm asking to keep the entire town of Burlington safe and only open schools when it is safe. And at this point in time, I do not feel it is.
Okay. Thank you. The next person is Bonnie Tomasian.
Hi, thank you. I am a single mom with an immunocompromised single mom with 2 young children at Fox Hill, and I also work in the system. And like just about every teacher and parent, I want my kids back at school, but I want them back safely. I don't think it benefits them to go back, then have to come back. I can't work if my kids aren't in school, but I can't work if I get sick or if my kids get sick. So I think it has to be safety first. Like others have mentioned, I feel that the 6-foot distancing is extremely imperative, but also in addition to just being in a classroom, what about snack? The kids will have to remove their masks. When do they get into mask breaks or snack breaks? And if there's not that distancing, they're at a greater risk. Also, I know with like, what's the protocol for substitutes? I know that the goal is to have 1 substitute teacher, like, or more designated per school, and not to go from school to school. I work in a cafeteria in one of the schools. We are not overstaffed by any means. We have just what we need to get the job done working hard. If somebody is out in the cafeteria, who then steps in so we can, you know, meet the demands of getting the lunches to the children, even if it's for taking home. Because normally we would get staff from other cafeterias that would fill in, or we would have a substitute list, and those people could have been anywhere.
Okay.
I think I'm good.
Is that it?
For hours, but I think I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next person is Ashad Khan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, I'm a teacher and a parent in the district. I'm also on the BEA board, and I'm also in favor of going with a full remote plan to start this out. And I have some concerns that are largely logistical. I think that we're putting a lot of time and effort into trying to plan something where we can juggle remote and in-person, and it's incredibly complicated. And I think that going full remote is the way to solve a lot of those logistical problems. Remote is the only reliable system that we have. We could have all that work that's put into a hybrid thrown out the window within a couple weeks, and remote would still be there for us. I'm not satisfied with the remote plans that we have so far. At the high school, our hybrid, I'm not sure how the remote aspect of that is supposed to be played out. The hybrid also only gives us 2 times where we meet with the student, and only one of those is in person. I think that there's just much to be desired with the remote plan, and I think that we should be spending the next few weeks figuring out.
Having trouble hearing you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just think that there's a lot to be desired with how our remote plan is created, and I think that we should spend the next few weeks working on that, as opposed to trying to find ways to handle a mix of in-person and remote. I think also sick days are going to become an issue. I think that the slightest cough is going to send somebody home, and then we're just not going to have the subs to handle this. So I think that what we should be spending our time doing is planning how to make sure that we've distributed technology to students and teachers, how to make sure that we have materials sent out to students, and how to.
Does someone have a microphone on that isn't speaking?
To somebody in the chat who just said that remote is an option, it's not an option that works clearly for everybody, because We're trying to deal with both.
Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello? um,
We hear you. We hear
Okay.
you.
I think that we need to address childcare issues for a lot of parents that are parents of the elementary age kids, and I think that that's what we should spend our time trying to flesh out instead of trying to juggle both remote and in person. I think we can do a better job of it, much better than we did in the spring, and I think that that's how we should be moving forward. Thank you. Christine, are you still there? I can't. I've finished.
I think she's having technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Ginny was up next.
I think it's worth. Wait.
Is it this? Is that from me? Oh. Hi, this is Ginny. Is that okay for me to speak, or is that me giving that feedback?
Go ahead and try.
Okay. So I apologize. I don't know if that's from me or not. So I am a parent in town, but I'm also a high school teacher in another district. And speaking to logistical concerns, just knowing kids and knowing how kids are, and not, all even good kids tend to be forgetful and tend to forget that they're not invincible. So, one of the logistical concerns I have is how bathrooms at the middle school and high school level will be monitored. And I know somebody brought up that there's bathroom monitors for MCAS. So, I was wondering if that was being considered because the opportunity for kids to congregate in the bathroom, potentially maskless, to me presents an opportunity for spread. That is a huge logistical concern for me.
That makes sense. Is that it? Do you have any more?
Nope, that's just to me that's one huge logistical risk that I haven't heard addressed. And I do also want to say I appreciate all of the consideration and all of the thought and all of the planning. And the parent side of me really does appreciate all of that. And I like what I've heard so far and the answers that I've heard so far. But the teacher side of me who sees what happens in high schools and sees kids being kids in high school has those logistical concerns where there are a lot, there are just opportunities for kids to be kids and be in groups without masks doing kid things. So that's my big concern about a return to school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Martha, is there anybody else on the list? You're muted.
Looks to me like, I don't know if Lisa Gogan wanted to speak. Lisa, are you still there? If not, the next person on the list is Kelly George. I'm sorry. Please correct me when you speak. Kelly? Yes. Okay, we're waiting to see if either Lisa or Kelly are here. The next person on the list is Jean DeRosa. She want to speak?
Hi, this is Jean DeRosa. So I am a teacher at Burlington High School. I've been working towards my doctorate in education, and I can speak to the remote learning that we did in the spring semester. Um, it was extremely time consuming. I was working from 7:30 in the morning till 5:30 p.m. most days. Um, it took a lot to develop the lessons to do remote learning. And so when I look at the high school schedule for the fall, I have to tell you, I am really struggling with how I am going to balance a home life, school life situation. Because if I have to come in and teach every day of the week and still develop remote learning plans, I just don't see how that is humanly possible. Um, quite frankly, I think I can be very effective teaching remotely. I teach at UMass Lowell at night, and we were fully remote in the spring semester. And I taught Calculus 2, and the kids did extremely well, and they learned extremely well. So I know I can teach remotely. I know I can teach in school, but I cannot see how I can physically balance those two things. It needs to be one or the other in my mind. I've really been online on Twitter. I've been talking with educators from all over the United States, and I'm just really struggling with how to juggle both with the time constraints. So I thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Is there someone we missed that wants to speak?
It's Kelly Torres. You had called me before. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, do you mind?
No, go for it.
Okay, first, the district is showing two options. So we do know that people who want to keep their children home and have that, that remote option, that it is there for them. But, this is the public schools, and public education is too important to not make a full-on effort to make this a priority. It does not benefit students to start school removed from meeting teachers and children, especially at the elementary level. And, obviously in Burlington, we all support our teachers. And this is the reason we want our teachers to teach our students, not us parents to be home with them, to deal with the mental health issue of isolating these kids from real learning, not remote learning that's a choice board, but real learning, whether it's a hybrid or, partially in person. It just concerns me that the overwhelming wave and push and input seems to be coming, and it's from the BEA and not from the parents and not from the community who pay the taxes and who have an investment in our public education from the student's point of view. This is not student focused, this push against putting kids in school if we are already offering a remote option. Kids have been at camps, my kid being one of them, and other activities, wearing masks successfully. I have not seen any non-compliance with children. I've not seen children who don't want to be there because the mask is on. And I think we're only hearing the viewpoint of adults telling us what they think kids will be like. Kids want to be in a normal, structured environment, and they will do what the teachers tell them, and they will do what the administration has laid out, because that's what children do at school. And there will always be exceptions, but we can't keep catering to what if in the exceptions. How our kids learn is by interacting with teachers, and to not have this resistance to having these options, because this is public education. You are creating a have and a have not right now. There are people who financially and mentally can't afford to keep their children home. And I wanted to state that as parents, we should be able to make that choice to send our kids in person or not in person. And from what Dr. Conti is saying, we have that option, and everything is being looked into seriously. No one is taking this lightly. And I just think that, what's the component factoring in the mental health? We have, school counselors and school nurse who need to help these children with this. Maybe school is different next year. Maybe it is science is talking about viruses and how people research in labs. Maybe that's what school becomes. We all have to pivot. The whole world has pivoted, and I'm not understanding why education does not want to pivot, especially with an administration like ours, who is making the effort and who is looking into this, not using my brother said and my father said, but real science and looking into the HVAC. I just feel like it does not benefit students to start school removed from a school community, however that may look. And I feel like there's a resistance to streaming classes online by the teachers union and by being in person. So what's the option? We just don't go to school? That's not an option. Everything here is about education and not about how we get around it. And I think, you know what, you have to listen to both sides of this, because education is that important. For all the people that I see in restaurants in our town and at bar, you know, like these outdoor bars that are restaurants and on the beach, they're all part of our community and who are putting their input in too. So I think the fact of the matter is, if everybody's priority is to do the fun things in life, how about education? Education is what's important here. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Martha, I'm losing track of these names. Can you help me out?
I think that Lisa Gogan was the only other person who put their name down. So if Lisa Gogan is still wanting to speak, please speak up. And if there's someone else, please put your name in now, because I don't see any other names.
Nick Merlino just put his name in.
Okay, thank
And
you.
if we can ask people not to have sidebar in the chat, we can keep track of who wants to actually speak on the mic. Thank you.
Yeah, please, everyone, don't make comments in the chat, just names. And we're getting towards the end of the time allotted for this, so we'll just take a few more comments. So Martha, who was it you just called?
It's
Nick Merlino?
Nick Merlino, yes.
Okay, Nick? Are you there, Nick Merlino? I think he may be having a microphone problem.
Okay.
Harry Donahue?
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I have a child at Francis Wyman, entering 5th grade at Francis Wyman this year, and I strongly agree with most of what's been said this evening about the option for remote. I work at a local university, which is remote through the fall for all the reasons that people are talking about. It is not safe to bring children back in this environment right now. I think we're talking about a return to school simply because it's September, and we're not actually thinking about whether or not it's actually safe or whether it's the right time. For us, the decision to go remote this fall was a complete no-brainer. And I realize that we're very privileged in being able to do that, and that a lot of families don't have the choice that we have. Because I'm remote, I can teach my child at home. What I haven't seen enough about is the messaging that I would like to see from the district, from schools, from administrators, that for parents who have the option to keep their children at home, my option to keep my child at home means those who don't have a choice, if we are in fact going to have in-person schooling, have one less child in the school to worry about. There's less risk for the people who have to put their children in school if those of us who can keep them home do keep them home. And I wish that there were more messaging around that. I obviously wish that we were full remote. That would be my choice. But knowing that there are parents who have to send their children to school, if in fact we end up with a hybrid model, I would like to see the district encourage parents to keep their kids home if they can, to reduce the risk for the kids who are actually in school, whose parents don't have that privilege to keep them home.
All right, thank you. There was one other name that I saw.
Am I working now?
Are you working now? Go
Hello?
ahead, Mike. Are you Nick Merlino?
Yeah, I'm Nick. Hi there.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't know. I've been listening to a lot of the comments. Obviously, this isn't a hard decision for anyone. I'm not a parent. I'm not a teacher. Nothing. I'm just interested in the safety of everyone. And great job, everyone, with this decision. It's tough. Someone mentioned that we should listen to the science of it and put people back in school so they can learn, and eventually we can learn more. I linked in the chat a little earlier. The company I worked at. I mean, I think it is well respected throughout both the state and the federal government area, but the company is called MITRE, and they did a study. Oh, can you hear me now? It says.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No?
Yes, we hear you. Can hear you.
Oh, okay, great. So, yeah, MITRE did a study and in cooperation with state and federal agencies, and their recommendation was, I think it was one for, it keeps dropping out, I think. Well,
no, we're here.
Anyway,
you're not. No.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, okay. So the recommendation from that study is in the chat, and it says that for the state that we are in now, you probably shouldn't go back to school. Yes, there are a lot of benefits from going back, but that's not it. And also, I'm not sure if people have been paying attention. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not sure. All of you have been paying attention to the rest of like the world and everyone going back to school. And someone said that students will follow what we say and they won't like without masks be near each other. But if you're on any social media like Reddit sites, a lot of students around the whole U.S. who are in schools who go back to school are posting videos all the time, like videos and pictures. Students are next to each other, even with masks. They're touching each other. A lot of students are without masks, talking to each other, and like from the real world scenario of what students do, like we all know, I mean, we all like to say students don't really listen, but I mean, it's because it's true. Like students will not social distance as much as they should. And again, the science behind it from MITRE, which I think is reputable, says the same. We shouldn't go back to school. Okay, yeah, the link is in the chat also to the study. Thank you.
Okay, the last one I'm going to call is Elizabeth Cooper.
Thank you. I just want to add in that it looks like we will go in the direction of remote, and that probably is the most responsible decision, at least for the fall. So what I'd like to see from the district is a very detailed description of what remote will look like, especially my kids are in going into 8th grade, going into senior year. These are critical years, as all of them are for all of our kids, but 8 and senior are swing years for sure. So I'd like to see very detailed, are we using Google Meets? Are we using Zoom? Do teachers need training? There are plenty of us in the business community who have talked about this. We've offered to provide training, provide coaching, and just to let the educators in town know that we do support you. There have been some divisive things out there, but the overarching message is that you are supported. We have one of the best districts in the state. So let's do this and do it well for our kids and for ourselves and our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go back to the school committee now. And
I think there was one other person, if you're willing to take Carrie Donahue. Did Carrie Donahue want to speak? And then we can finish.
I already spoke.
Sorry. Oh, you spoke before Nick?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
So if we're going back to the committee, who wants to speak first on the committee? Martha, do you want to go? It's up to you.
Very difficult. I don't necessarily.
I'll go.
First, but,
Chris, I'll go.
okay.
All right, Tom.
I will speak soon, but.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank everybody who joined us this evening and who has joined us over the past couple of months. Clearly, it's a hot button issue, and I commend all the townspeople of taking a part in the discussion and obviously taking an interest in the schools. I also want to preface my remarks by saying that my current opinion is based on current data and current facts and what's out there now. Obviously, this is a fluid situation, and if and when things change, I think like all of us, I reserve my right to change accordingly. I'd also just like to, for the record, say that we've all, the 5 school committee members anyway, have received quite a bunch of information over the past several months. Certainly a lot of letters and emails from residents and other people. So I'm confident that I think the 5 of us have all received sufficient information to make a decision tonight. And I think this is clearly an issue upon which reasonable minds can differ. And I also know that, in my opinion, whatever decision is made, I think by the 5 of us, each of us is going to do what we, in our best efforts and good faith, have decided is the best way to go. So I certainly will not have a problem with somebody who disagrees with my opinion, and I trust that goes both ways with everybody else in the committee. It's not an easy decision. It's not an easy situation, and there's clearly plenty of information on both sides that could lead you to decide one way or the other. But having said all that, and I did make the motion to start discussion here to get it on the table. I'm going to support the superintendent and the administration's plan that they put forward this evening. to go with what they call a hybrid and restarting of school. Dr. Conti said in his preface his remarks was saying this is a case of measuring risk, comparing risk, and there's always risk. Everybody's fully aware of what this disease has done over the past 5 or 6 months, and obviously nobody wants to put somebody's health and safety at risk. But there's also clearly quite a bit of data on children who don't physically appear in school and what that does to them over a period of time. And also factored in the equation is the economic effect of all this. There are a lot of parents out there who have to work for a living. They have bills to pay, and this all plays into their situation as well. So there's a lot of risk, regardless of which direction this goes in. And there's no way that any of us are going to sit here and take all risk out of the picture or come up with a solution that doesn't have an element of risk to it. If we were sitting here in Florida or Texas right now, we wouldn't even be having this discussion because those numbers are crazy, and hopefully it doesn't get that way. But if it does up here, then I would change my opinion. But we're sitting here in a state with a pretty low number on a percentage of on the testing percentage. The town of Burlington's is significantly lower than the state of Massachusetts. So I look at this as saying, if we can't try an in-house or in-person situation now, when are we ever going to be able to? I mean, the numbers are low enough, so the data tells us that we can give it a shot. If we start fully remote now to say maybe we'll ease into it later on, I can't see the numbers getting any better. So my opinion is that I believe that the risk of going fully remote is stronger than the risk of trying to go with a hybrid solution right now. I just think that there's more, in my opinion, there's going to be more benefit by getting the kids back into school now under the conditions that the administration has set up, and try to manage the risk of spreading the disease as best we can. And if the numbers start going the other way, then we'll react accordingly. So I just want to, again, thank everybody. I want to thank the administration for all the work that they've done putting this together. I fully understand the concern of people who think it's not safe. Like I said, reasonable people can differ. I think it's not safe not to have kids back in school if we're in a situation where our numbers indicate that we can do that safely. So I'm going to support the administration, and that's where I'm going on the vote tonight.
Chris, you're muted.
Thanks, Martha. Who wants to go next? Carl, would you like to speak next?
Sure, I can speak.
Go ahead.
So I will echo what Tom said as far as thanking Dr. Conti and his staff, the entire administration for putting together a extremely well thought out plan. There are about 10 million bases to cover, and I think they've covered at least a good percentage of them. There's still questions out there, of course, and I'm confident that they're going to continue working and finding solutions. I'd also like to thank everyone that has reached out to the committee and reached out to me personally and giving their feedback. I haven't been able to respond to every one of them, so if you are one of those that I did not respond to yet, sorry, and I will get to those messages. At this point, my thinking is that we need to err on the side of caution. And what I would like to advocate for is a remote start and a phased-in approach, a phased-in return as health metrics determine that it is safe. I am concerned it is a slow creep in the state. It is a slow creep in our town. And even if our numbers are lower than surrounding communities, we don't live in a bubble, and people are coming in and out, and it contributes to the spread. And so, I mean, I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about, of course, the safety of students, staff, and teachers, and want to make sure that, I mean, I agree that we can't guarantee a 100% risk-free environment, but we can take steps, we can watch data, we can watch what other school districts do. What I would like to see is the results of the surveys that are going to be going out this week of parents and staff. I think at this point, the data is several weeks old, and in the context of COVID, that is ancient, and we need more up-to-date data. I also would like to see the results of the air quality survey before I can support a return to the buildings. All that being said, there are still concerns about the needs of the most vulnerable students in our schools, and I would like to see some more information about how we're going to take care of them if everyone else is in a remote environment. And I'm also I'll end by saying that I am hopeful that we will continue to revisit this question and make more decisions based on the continuing accumulation of the data that we're going to be looking for. And that's it for me for now.
Thank you, Carl. Martha?
I would speak now. This is very difficult for me, and I want to also thank all the people who put so much. Oh, you don't hear me?
Yeah.
I know there's background noise. Hold on. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I want to thank everyone who's put all the work into this. I think the plan that Dr. Conti has proposed is a good one. And it's not Dr. Conti's plan, it's a plan that all of these people have put together. I do believe that we have the space and have done the planning to open with some in-person learning. And I do believe that the more in-person learning we can do safely, the better for all of our students. And I am also making my decision after hearing from many families and many staff, reading as much as I can, reading the research, and basing it on health and safety, education, and also the contingencies. So, you know, with the health and safety, I mean, people have examples of places in other parts of the country and other parts of the world. And if we, again, if we were in Florida, I would not feel safe opening any of our schools right now. But we do live here, and we don't live in Chelsea. Yes, we're not in a bubble in Burlington, but the numbers right now, I feel I can support this hybrid idea of trying to get some of the kids into the buildings as much as we can with safety. I think that you know that the space has been looked at very carefully. Even the fact that we have 12 weeks of personal protective equipment, to me, is one of the most important things. At the end, I was going to say this at the end, but if we run out of PPE, I'm going to vote to shut down the schools again. I mean, this is right. 12 weeks is nothing, but I'm assuming we'll be able to get more. But if we can't, I would not be in a position to say, I think we should keep the schools open. So I know that Dr. Conti and all the staff have talked with the Board of Health. They've looked at the available information, scientific information about best practices. And then I look at the educational issues. I think that it's just the more our students are together with their teachers and their peers, the better the educational experience will be. We all know that the emotional and developmental needs of our students are best served by having at least some in-person education. I do think it's important to, if the numbers stay the same, that we start the year in person so that the teachers can develop relationships that they had already in the that they had at the in March. They had to develop the relationship so they could do the remote learning better. But the remote learning from last spring is not to be compared with what's going to be happening in the fall. The teachers, it's hard. I think we do need to give the teachers the support they need to be able to do the remote and the in-person and be careful about that. So I think that concern that was raised earlier is an important one. But I would like to spend our time thinking about how to support our teachers and get into the in-person education if we can. If in 4 weeks our numbers are looking different, if we look like Florida in 4 weeks, I would request another school committee vote on this, and I would not be in favor of having students or teachers go into the buildings. But right now, I feel like in order to put in our vote for the state requirement of saying now at the middle of August what we think we're going to want to do in September, I think I do feel that the educational piece is important enough. And while we continue to develop the remote learning skills for our students and our teachers, that's going to have to go on whether we are fully remote or whether we're hybrid. And like I said, I want to repeat that this depends, it's contingent on if we have enough personal protective equipment on hand, if the transmission rates in our town, in our region stay low. And I would change my mind if I felt that that was different. This is very hard for me personally, but not compared to what it's like for each of the families and each of the teachers who are being affected by my vote tonight. They're conflicting and contradictory needs. And so not everyone's needs are going to be met by either decision that we can make. And I understand that there will be difficulties for many people. This is a pandemic. It's a public health crisis. There are so many uncertainties, and we're going to have to be flexible and open to change. And so I will vote tonight for the hybrid reopening because I do think that it is best way for our students to get their education. And I do believe it is safe now for students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Catherine, would you like to say something?
Sure. Again, I'm mirror what everyone's been saying. I want to thank Dr. Conti and everyone else who's done all the research and, done this wonderful presentation to everybody. I'm happy that they've been communicating, so regularly with everybody, and that there's been a lot of input from parents. I appreciate the parents who, again, have written to the school committee and written to me individually. I've gotten back to, I think, everybody so far who's contacted me. I want to let you know I've taken everything that people have said very seriously from both sides. I totally get what everyone's concerns are, whether it's, I want my kids in school or I don't want them in school. I feel for everybody. But I also, in looking at the benefits of sending kids back into the school environment and the science that's out there, I can say from my personal experience, having to be being an essential worker, I have been going into work every day since this pandemic started. Every woman has been following the protocols at my office, not only locally, but nationwide. And not one case has been spread internally. I know people are of the opinion that kids are very different, but I think that if we, enforce what we're trying to enforce in the schools, for the kids to all be wearing masks, to have all of the proper cleaning supplies, the hand sanitizer, et cetera, that, at this point, like everyone said, with the rates so low right now in Burlington, that I think the benefit for the kids starting out back on this program that's been presented to support the hybrid program, that I think is the best way to start the year. I think it's going to help the parents. I mean, there are a lot of parents out there who do have to go to work every day. And the fact that there is an option for people to choose to have their kids go fully remote if they're uncomfortable sending them in. I think that, we're trying to take all of that into consideration. And so, again, I've not made this decision lightly. It's difficult. I realize that, we all have to watch the numbers very, very carefully. And as everyone has stated, if things start to go back on the upswing, then the fact that we'll be in a hybrid situation, if that's how this vote goes overall, that, people will be better equipped to go back to the full remote because we've been practicing that all along. So at this point, I am going to support the program that has been presented tonight, the hybrid program. And again, I think we need to just watch everything carefully and do what we have to do in the future. And if that means go fully remote in the future and vote on that, then we do that. But right now, I think it would benefit more for us to start off in the hybrid situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. Okay, I guess I'll make my comments fairly briefly. First of all, I think that a lot of people have put a lot of work into the solutions that Dr. Conti has presented. I think we've had a great number of teachers in each building that have helped with this planning. And to all of them and to the administrators, I would like to say thank you. I've heard a lot tonight about about how remote is really a safe way to go, and I'm sure it is a safe way to go. And there are many students that can do very nicely with remote and can learn as much as they would learn in person. Some may even learn more remotely. However, what I have not heard a lot about tonight is those students who do not learn well remotely. And I know there are many, many, many of them with little kids, the preschool kids, the special needs kids, the kindergartners who are struggling to learn to read and are not learning remotely, the elementary students that are busy and don't pay attention to the remote lessons because it's not in their personality. And I have personally watched since March these kids at every level, even at the high school level. Some students don't do well remotely. Some students have special needs and they don't get much out of remote. And I think that they have suffered since March not having classes. And I think that there has been a tremendous amount of mental health issues, weight gain. There are some serious issues with these kids not being in school. I do believe that we're lucky in Massachusetts that things are better, but I hope that the governor will enforce the rules and regulations. I hope that people will take seriously that they need to do social distancing, that they need to wear masks. And I would remind people that when you wear a mask, you don't do it to protect yourself, you wear it to protect other people. I think we need to get back to school, and I am going to hope that people do the right thing and the numbers continue to go down. And if it doesn't happen, and if the numbers go up, then we will have to go back to remote. I just hope, I sincerely hope that does not happen. I think there are too many kids that need to be in school, and they're just suffering by being out of school. So obviously, from my comments, it's clear that I will support Dr. Conti's request. Is there anyone else on the committee that wishes to say anything before we take a vote? Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Martha?
I just want to say, I've been trying to follow it. People are having a full conversation in the chat, and I've been trying to follow it a little bit. And there's many questions that can be answered. These things are not finalized. If there's information that comes out later, we'll certainly include it in our decision making, and Dr. Conti will as well. And specifically, when I referred to 4 weeks from now, I didn't mean 4 weeks after school started. I meant when school's starting. That's 4 weeks from now. A lot could change. So I just hope people will continue to send their questions in at that email. I know this is really difficult for a lot of people, and I'm ready to take the vote. Sorry.
Okay. A lot of people asked me not to have the chat on tonight, and the only reason I decided to keep it on was because I wanted to see the names of people who wanted to speak. But it is distracting, and I understand why people wanted it off. Maybe my choice of words isn't always right, and using the word hope, someone just said that wasn't the best word, and maybe it isn't. But I am hoping that people do the right thing. And I think that by doing the right thing, practicing the social distancing, we increase our chances of being successful, having kids back in school. And I would ask everyone who's watching, everyone who you can contact, please ask people to do the right thing with social distancing and wearing masks and hand washing and hand sanitizer, because it is our only hope of getting any kind of normalcy relative to school and life in general. If my choice of words is poor, I'm sorry for that, but I do believe we need to send our kids back to the extent possible. And if we have a problem, if the numbers start to go up, Dr. Conti will be all over it. And if we end up having to go remote on a dime like we did last March, then that's what we'll do. Having said that, it is time to take a vote. All those in favor of the motion, which was made by Mr. Murphy and seconded by Martha, to approve the presentation given by Dr. Conti, what are the real words there, Eric? To approve what?
All you're doing is approving a hybrid to go with our remote system. You're just saying the planning for in-person should continue.
Okay, to approve the remote learning program as hybrid? I'm all messed up.
You're approving a hybrid return to accompany our remote learning.
Okay, what he said. All those in favor? Mrs. Simon?
I vote aye.
Mr. Foss?
Nay.
Mrs. Bond?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mrs. Monaco votes aye. There's a 4-1 vote with Mr. Foss dissenting.
Madam Chair? Madam
Yes.
Chair, I just want to, again, thank the committee. I want to thank all the public participation. I just want to remind everyone that this is just a moment in time. It's a moment in time brought on by a state deadline, understanding that we still have lots of information to gather. We have information about our HVAC evaluations, which I'll be sharing with the committee and sharing publicly. That may change the context. My understanding is also we should be receiving some state metrics from the governor's office in terms of the decision to close schools. It would certainly not be my decision. It would either come locally through the Board of Health or would come from state metrics through the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. But what I will say is if past is prologue, Burlington actually shut their schools down a day before the governor recommended that the entire state do so. So we're certainly not afraid to step out when we need to when it comes to student safety. We have done that already. We're going to need to continue to work on our schedules. I know some people have pointed out some challenges, so we'll continue to work on our hybrid schedules given this vote. I also think now we have to spend much more time on our remote learning options and our fully remote schedules as well. So we need to do that concurrent planning because we will have some families who are choosing a full remote learning experience. And it may be, given the information and the science and the data that we get over the next few weeks, again, the committee could change their mind, or the metrics in the state could mean that we are fully remote. So again, please, this is just a moment in time. The school committee has allowed us to meet the state deadline. We will submit both a hybrid and a remote plan to the Department of Elementary Education. We'll continue to talk publicly about all the information that we're gathering. And I think we really need to look, certainly I'll make sure we're sharing this information regularly, but we're really looking at this information daily to make sure, and any significant changes where you're getting, I think, many emails from me every day, and I appreciate all of the reading that you're doing. But again, this is not a, this is just a decision that allows us to meet a state deadline and continue to plan for an in-person return. So again, I appreciate that, and we will continue to our work on both an in-person plan and a remote learning plan. I think over the coming week or so, we're going to have different levels: preschool, elementary, middle, and high school, doing more detailed communication to families about what the possible in-person returns will look like specifically at each level. And then we'll also have information from families about which students are returning, which students are staying remote, and we'll have more information from staff as well. So I'm sorry, the complete picture can't be presented prior to the deadlines that are coming up. The timeframes are really short, and we'll continue to, I think, do our planning in public and share information. And again, hopefully that the environment will allow us to return to some in-person learning. Again, I will agree with everyone who said schooling is meant to be in person. We do an outstanding job with that. No one is saying that remote learning will replace that. And no one is also saying that what we are proposing for remote in the fall will resemble anything that we did in the spring. It's going to be much more remote, much more robust, and I think there's going to be significant differences. So we're going to continue our planning in both ends. So I know this was a long meeting. I know there's a lot of information to absorb, and I appreciate the committee's time, and I appreciate everybody who contributed tonight. We are listening, and we will continue to listen, and hopefully then make the best choices for our kids in the fall. So, Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Okay, I hate to do this, but the chat has become an issue. And to the gentleman that made the very disrespectful remark a few minutes ago, if you were referring to me, I guarantee you I am cold sober. I had a little difficulty with making the motion because I wanted it to be right, and therefore I wanted Eric to say it. Is there anything else to come before the committee tonight?
Motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry, Eric, I didn't hear you.
No, ma'am, we're set.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mrs. Bond?
Aye.
Mr. Foss?
Aye.
Ms. Simon?
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. Good night.